Sound art is a product that is a speaker and it's art. We combine it together and we call it sound art. What makes it so unique that any picture can be your speaker? Sound art gives you the high quality sound without the ugly speaker. This isn't a picture with a speaker, the picture is the speaker. Just imagine your wedding picture uploaded onto a canvas and now it's speaking 10,000 tunes. I mean, it's a very cool concept. What we like so much about it that you can take anything that means something very special to you, upload it on the canvas, have it hanging up in your room, your balcony, wherever you want to put it, and now it's a speaker. I mean, how cool is that? It's something that we have that and no one has. No one has this product. It's just a great gift to give anybody. It's just a neat concept. Around here we say, art never sounded so good.
After months of quarantine, we're all interested in how we can become our best self. The team at Permanent Makeup and Cryo is here to help you get the flawless makeup look every day without the extra effort or time. When it comes to your appearance, you deserve the best care that money can buy.
With 4 races to go in the 2021 Pacific Challenge GT3 Series, we come to a venue that is the keystone to the German footprint of motorsports, the Nurburgring, a track that carries a unique set of challenges through quite literally each and every bend and corner. As we kick off this final endurance stretch of the schedule, we have a new leader in the championship standings. By virtue of his 3rd win of the season last week at Laguna Seca, Chris Beets now leads Jesse Webb in the standings by a mere 6 points. In what is perhaps the biggest wild card on the schedule, who will lay claim to the toughest challenge of the championship chase after a 2-hour marathon in Deutschland? This is round 7 of the 2021 Pacific Challenge GT3 Series, and it's coming up next live on Pit Stop TV. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Nurburgring. I'm Eric Brennan, and we got a 3-man booth for you tonight, as this is obviously a lot of land to cover for tonight's action. I'm going to be joined tonight on the call by a gentleman who's pulling double duty in more than one capacity tonight on the platform, Andrew Cardinale IV. You'll also hear the voice of Trey Shuttlesworth on the call tonight as well. Also, we want to give a shout out to Corey Rexford, who is handling all of our duties on social media. This is going to be fun, and it's also going to be a little bit different. So be sure to tell your friends and family that you're watching, as we are all across our platforms on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. And this is going to be a fun one for sure, as we are starting to see how this championship season is starting to shape up for our final run to the end of the campaign. However, Andrew, as we look at this racetrack, we know the history behind it. We know all that's involved. This truly takes the term race the racetrack to a whole nother level. There's a lot to cover. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to watch. And I'm excited to be bringing it to everybody who's going to be watching us here, as this has been an incredibly competitive series. And I think there's no tougher task than what we have on track here tonight with this 15 somewhat plus mile course.
Thank you, Eric. I'm very excited to be back here for Pacific Challenge competition. First time of the season, actually. You mentioned racing the racetrack. It's going to be tough. In fact, we have 11 drivers making the move between race cars, all to the Ferrari, in fact. The Ferrari, obviously the popular choice, and it just seems to be the most stable workhorse for these drivers as they tackle what is going to be the tallest measure of talent yet. This is properly the biggest challenge these drivers have ever had in the Pacific Challenge. We go straight into looking at our track map, of course, and it is a toughie. Now, I want to point out This does feature a few extra corners down at the bottom left, so if you notice this and you're very familiar with the VLN layout here of the Nürburgring, we apologize for that, but you see that usually we would go into the Ford curve, Dunlop curve, Schumacher S. We're actually bypassing those corners. We are utilizing the sprint layout of the GP course before turning onto the Nürburgring there at the north turn. If you translate it into English, you'll come around through the town of Nürburgring, well, leaving the town of Nürburgring rather, going up towards what would be translated into High Oak. I don't want to try that pronunciation. It's you can see it there. It's on the screen. You go past what I believe would be Quiddelbacher Hove into Flugplatz, which loosely translates, or I guess literally translates rather, into airfield. Then you head down into, let's see, Schwedenkreuz, which literally means Swedish cross, into the famed Armberg corner. Armberg is a very tough one. It's where a few years back in one of the 24-hour VLN races actually here, they had a bunch of rain and a bunch of cars came sliding in. It's very tough. It doesn't really look as tough when you look at it on a track map. It's just like a hairpin there between a couple of very fast sections, but you're coming downhill and into a really tough braking zone. It's going to throw these drivers for a few loops. You head around towards the top end of the circuit here on our map towards the town of Adenau. You go through let's see, the Fruchsruher. It's somewhat loosely how you pronounce it. It literally translates to Foxtube. Just past Armberg, through the Adenauer Forest and into the town of Adenau. You head up towards Viersiefen, which translates to Defense Soaps. And you know what, Trey Shuttlesworth? I'm not even going to try the rest of the lap. It's already getting to be that long. I mean, this place is massive. I could go on all day about corner meetings, corner translations, and everything else here.
Without a doubt, Andrew, it's an enigma of a racetrack, and there's a lot of components of the racetrack that offer a lot of unique challenges. You think it might get repetitive after a while, but the natural elevation changes you find here, and what would be Bavaria, Germany, does provide a lot of unique cornering opportunities, and a lot of it remains as it was originally designed for the most part, I would have to say. But no, you covered a large portion of the circuit. Other notable components of the circuit that we haven't talked about, of course, the carousel 180 degrees. You called it NASCAR, if you will, because it's a 180 degree left-hander, has some camber in it, and it's one of two corners where you have a little bit of concrete as well. And then you go into a very technical high-speed component of the circuit, get to the Danger Home, one of the few places where you really have a bit of a break. And in total, it is about 15 miles to get around this VLN layout. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I did have to make note of it a bit earlier. It's very interesting. This is the one time that you'll see towns labeled on a racetrack map, I would have to say, unless you were to go to, say, the Isle of Man.
That's a great point, Trey. And I was actually, doing a little bit of the math myself. I tried to come up with an explanation of how far away, this track spans. When you look at 15 miles on a map, I mean, you're talking, a pretty good trip. And even for these drivers, you're talking just under 8 minutes a lap. This is something that's certainly going to take a lot of time to complete. That's why this event is slated for 2 hours. So for all of our friends watching, you may want to grab your favorite Weissbier, German Pilsner, or Kolsch. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show, as we are going to have a fun one in bringing you all this coverage. Now, as we look at Chris Beets, he's a driver who went out and captured victory the last time out at Laguna Seca. However, in practice, he appeared to be a little bit off the pace. But Andrew, one element that you and I have been talking about a little bit throughout the night that has come up multiple times in conversation throughout the season is that we end up in this situation we're talking about fuel mileage. A lot of these drivers have to calculate their fuel loads when they come down for their one single pit stop in a sprint race. This is a 2-hour endurance event. I believe it's going to be the longest event on the season. Our first endurance race was 90 minutes. We don't expect to go this long next week at Sebring. These guys are going to be crunching numbers from the very start to the very finish. The practice session was only an hour and 40 minutes. So unless these guys did a lot of practicing throughout the week and kind of were flirting with different types of, fuel settings and whatnot, they may not have a true idea as to what position they're going to be in at the end of this race until they get there.
Yeah, Eric, we're looking at the longest laps all season, the longest race all season. We're looking at about 4 or 5 laps, depending on how these guys want to play some strategy. You go out to 5 laps, it's about 40 minutes or so, and that's going to get you right to 2 hours. It's looking dangerously close for some of these drivers lapping under 8 minutes. It would actually be in their best interest to lap just over 8 minutes. That said, with the pit stops, it may take them over 8 minutes on average. We'll just have to wait and see how it plays out. We may see some short pitting at 4 laps just to try and guarantee that they will make it and not run out towards the end of their final stint. One, of course, bring us into our point standings. And Trey Shuttlesworth, watching all these battles over the course of the season so far, Evolve has been a ton of fun. You guys have been doing it firsthand. I've done it a couple of times, helping Corey Rexford on our social media and just watching from afar. Chris Beats, Jesse Webb, 3 apiece, and they have easily torn away from the rest of the field. You do see at the bottom, the drop week has now been applied to these point standings. Even so, Chris Brunemer, 146 points back. John Whitendorf, 232. It's insane.
Yeah, and while those top 2 have pulled away, and it's setting up for what's going to be a compelling battle coming down to what is now the final 4 rounds of the championship, you can see that with this drop applied already here halfway through the season, there's going to be a lot of compelling battles throughout the top 10. The top 10 do consist of all entirely of our pro drivers in the series, so that's just one of 2 championships that we have on offer in the series. And the other thing that's worth noting as we look at the point standings here tonight is just the fact that a lot of these guys may not be in their normal manufacturer tonight. You get one chance, one opportunity, if you will, to utilize an alternative car, and we're seeing a lot of drivers elect to go to different manufacturers tonight here at the Nurburgring, finding a different competitive advantage than they might find. For a lot of these guys, it's either the Audi R8 or the Lamborghini Huracan. So yeah, we'll just have to see what these guys roll out with tonight here as we continue with this qualifying session.
And the other thing to consider is, as you see there, Beats and Webb are the only 2 drivers that have won this season. We've had 6 races. They've got 3 wins apiece. It's starting to get to a little bit of crunch time here because the rest of the field, even if you're having a good run in points, like a Jackson Lowry, a James Hansen, a Trevor Anderson, a Nick Ludecki, who's really been running part-time, but every time he shows up, he's a threat for a podium, or a Curtis Jones or James Allen, you look at all these drivers here, and they don't want to be shut out by Webb and Beats all year long. They want a chance to be able to go out here and beat this caliber field, which will remind viewers who may not be the most casual followers of the Pacific Challenge GT3 Series. This series is built up with some of the best drivers on the road racing platform by virtue of iRating. As a matter of fact, they're even split up into a separate category with your pros and your amateurs, just to kind of even further show who is the best of the best and who is also the best of the best, but, you know, kind of working their way up the ladder on the iRating standpoint. And as you look at it here, your entire top 10 is made up of drivers in that pro category. We'll give a shout out to Sven Hartman, who was the highest scored amateur racer, who is 14th in championship standing. So that's how the points look after last week's round at Laguna Seca. As Trey and Andrew have already alluded to, we've got 4 rounds to go, and this is by far going to be perhaps the best opportunity for a name other than Webb and Beats to lay claim to victory. And Andrew, at the very last second of practice, it looked like Webb was going to be the one to set the flyer. However, he was outlasted in the session very late by John Wittendorf, who was fastest in the practice session. And as we watch this qualifying session start to unfold here, one other item that we should bring up, with lap times being about 8 minutes long, the quick times we'll see down in the 7-minute 51-second bracket or so. It really doesn't offer up a lot of opportunities for mistakes. Oftentimes, even at a track like last week at Laguna Seca, that's in about, around, or just shortly above or shortly over 2 miles in length, if you go out, overstep your boundaries, and wreck, you can reset, go back to the pit area, and still have plenty of time to get another lap in a 20-minute qualifying session. That's not the case here. You're going to have 2 shots max in order to get a good lap in, and that's going to play a huge role who wins this race.
Yeah, you get 1, maybe 2 mulligans on your out lap, and then you've got to be on flyers. Now, you can maybe catch some grass, catch some curving, and get an off track without hitting the wall, but otherwise, I think this will be a pretty incident-low racetrack. Quite simply, you just usually can't go off without catching yourself into some of the Armco listed around the the green hell around Nurburgring. So it's very punishing if you go even a few inches off course. You've got to make sure you are on the black stuff. Sometimes it's a few different colors with all the graffiti on it, but you've got to make sure you're on the pavement regardless, or you are going to have a bad day, especially in qualifying. Like you said, get about 2 shots. Now, I think you'll, of course, get a couple of extra seconds to finish up a lap if they go just beyond those 20 minutes, but it's not going to be much. You've got to make sure you are on it here in qualifying, along with within the race. Somebody who's on it here in qualifying is Brady Lubenow, checking in currently with our fastest time. And this is really surprising to me, actually. He's 3/10 clear of Chris Beets. And then it's very, very close from Chris Beets back to John Whitendorf, practice leader. And then it's really not all that far back, not even a tenth to Jesse Webb. The top four very close together, but Brady Lubenow is setting himself apart right now.
And you can see, sorry, Trey, you can go ahead, buddy.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, no, definitely. And we're already seeing, well, actually slightly off what the best times were in practice, but we're also going off a little bit less of a sample size. As Eric said a little bit earlier, we did have an hour and 40 for guys to go out there and set practice times. Currently, Brady Lubenow is sitting with a 7:52.074, so just a little bit under 8 minutes to get around here. Best time in practice was John Wittendorf, who topped the charts with a 7:51.706, just 2/10 up on Jesse Webb, who comes into tonight's championship picture in the runner-up position here at the Nurburgring.
So you see Lubenow still the quickest with Beets second, Wittendorf their third, Webb fourth, and Hansen your top five. Jones, Hayes, Anderson, Flanagan, and Peters your top 10 with about 3.5 minutes left to go in this qualifying session. We're going to step aside momentarily before we get set to go for our 2-hour event. We'll be right back on the other side with the results of qualifying and racing action for round number 7 of the 2021 Pacific Challenge GT3 Series here on Pit Stop TV.
After months of quarantine, we're all interested in how we can become our best self. The team at Permanent Makeup and Cryo is here to help you get the flawless makeup look every day without the extra effort or time. When it comes to your appearance, you deserve the best care that money can buy.
Sound Art is a product that is a speaker and it's art. We combine it together and we call it Sound Art. What makes it so unique that any picture can be your speaker? Sound Art gives you the high quality sound without the ugly speaker. This isn't a picture with a speaker, the picture is the speaker. Just imagine your wedding picture uploaded onto a canvas and now it's speaking 10,000 tunes. I mean, it's a very cool concept. What we like so much about it that you can take anything that means something very special to you, upload it on the canvas, have it hanging up in your room, your balcony, wherever you want to put it, and now it's a speaker. I mean, how cool is that? It's something that we have that and no one has. No one has this product. It's just a great gift to give anybody. It's just a neat concept. Around here we say, art never sounded so good.
After months of quarantine, we're all interested in how we can become our best self. The team at Permanent Makeup and Cryo is here to help you get the flawless makeup look every day without the extra effort or time. When it comes to your appearance, you deserve the best care that money can buy.
Sound Art is a product that is a speaker and it's art. We combine it together and we call it Sound Art. What makes it so unique that any picture can be your speaker? Sound Art.
Back here at the virtual Nurburgring, where we have just wrapped up qualifying. In fact, we're in the final 30 seconds or so for drivers who are left on track if they've already begun their lap. But with it taking so long to complete it here, you've got to be in the last sector to have any shot at getting back to the line like a couple of drivers are trying to do. And so far, last week's winner in Chris Beets, who is riding a wave of momentum in the term of back-to-back victories, is the quickest over John Wittendorf by 0.2 of a second, while Lubenow sits third. And Jesse Webb, who was one of the quicker cars in the practice session, he's trying to catch Beets in the standings by the 3-point margin, fifth. and Curtis Jones your top 5. And that will officially round out the session, so we'll have a chance to take a look at how they are going to line up once they begin staging here on the main straightaway for our event here this afternoon, which, as we mentioned, 2-hour endurance race, second endurance race of 3 on the slate. And this is how they're going to be coming to green here for this wild card event. Beets and Wittendorf on your front row. Beets trying to extend the championship point leader in car 33. Wittendorf outside in the 24, looking for his first win of the season. Inside of row 2, Grady Lubenow, who's exceptionally quick early in the qualifying session, had to settle for third. And Jesse Webb trying to get back in the win column. He's got 3 wins so far. In 2021, he'll start 4th. In the 5th starting position, Curtis Jones, who's had a very consistent season, trying to make up some ground in the standings. He's 10th in points right now in car 9. Outside, James Hansen, also looking to find victory lane, also trying to get back in the top 5 in points. That one car will line up in 6th. Row 4 is where you'll find Wade Hayes, who's been coming on strong as of late. Last couple of races have been spectacular for Hayes in the 83. And outside, Mikkel Rudebusch, who's shaking off the rust from how this season started. He, too, starting to put together results. That 22 will roll off from 8th spot. And rounding out your top 10, Alexander King, who also has been hot as of late, trying to get up higher in the standings as well. And Trevor Anderson on a bit of a roll himself is that of Anderson, 7th in championship points, fresh off back-to-back top 10s. He rounds out your top 10 in the starting field in the 108 car.
Rolling off from 11th is going to be Sven Hartman in the number 119 with David Flanagan next to him in 12th. Rolling off 13th on the inside of row number 7, Corey Peters in the 97. Then it's B.C. Voigt in the 64. Rolling off 15th, we've got Jimmy Allen in the 17 with the 177, a 17 plus another 7. Mick Blue starting 16th spot. Rolling off from 17th position, John McClintock, the 123, then Patrick Herring in the 144. And finally, to round out the top 20 here, Trey Shuttlesworth, Tyler Langenberg, and Alan Roth.
7 more drivers to go through here. It'll be 27 cars, smallest grid of the season to tackle the green held tonight. Last driver to set a time is George Tchek in the 21st position, joined by Chris Brunnemer, who's going to have to make a massive climb from the rear. It'll next be Gavin Cohn in the 23rd position, with Alexander Veldman making his first start of the season here in the series. Sarah Rabb is on a hot streak here as we head to the middle portion of the season. She starts in the 25th position. Randall Ayers to her outside. And then Antonio Constantino will round out the field in the 27th position tonight here at the Nurburgring.
So as Trey mentioned, 27 cars getting set to tackle this very tough 15-plus mile course. That, as we mentioned in the introduction, truly a staple to that, of the footprint of what is motorsports in Germany. It's oftentimes a track in which many would talk about. If many of you stock car fans, you remember the fact that Boris Said would say that this was an escape for him, or a getaway. He loved being able to find time to head overseas and test his ability as a road racing driver on this very circuit, which is why when the 2021 calendar rolled out for the Pacific Challenge GT3 Series, I'm not sure that anybody was all that surprised to see that this was going to be a marquee event, by far the biggest wild card event of the year, and the biggest opportunity for a driver not named Beets nor Webb to grab a victory before the season winds down. Well, here we go. It's going to be the point leader, pole sitter, and 3-time winner, and Chris Beets leading them down to green as they get underway. One car diving to the pit area already at the back of the pack, but we are green for 2 hours here at the Nurburgring, and it's going to be Beets getting the jump from pole, 3 wide for second, with Lubenow having a look. He'll duck back in line and fall to 4th off the first corner.
And already the field very single file until you get back to about Wade Hayes or so. This battle for 6th, 7th, 8th, and such. Curtis Jones in there in the number 9. And it looks like Wade Hayes is going to be side by side with the Ferrari. I believe that's going to be Curtis Jones. Mikkel Rudebusch further back. In fact, he's made the switch over to Ferrari. Everybody just about making the switch over to the 488.
And we'll make the 180-degree right-hander, not utilizing the full Grand Prix circuit here as part of the VLN layout here at the Nürburgring. And now we'll head left and right, and then into another chicane, and we'll be onto the proper Nürburgring here on the first lap here of this Nürburgring round of the Pacific Challenge.
Quickest laps that we saw all throughout the day, about 7 minutes and 51 seconds or so. Being that we're just getting underway, we can expect this first lap to take about 8 minutes in length. One item we have not talked about yet is how narrow the racing surface can be at select parts, even some of the most difficult parts here. As you can see, you can only fit about 2 cars wide here through this sector that they weave their way through. And some of these hard braking zones is going to allow some of the front-running competitors an opportunity to close their way up to beats the leader. It's very scenic, as you can see, very unique. Andrew mentioned earlier all the graffiti on some of these layouts and sectors of the racetrack, and it's allowing Wittendorf an opportunity here to close up. But Jesse Webb appears to be very hungry to get up towards the front of the pack early and often. He started 4th, up to 3rd, and pressuring Wittendorf heavily as we begin about, I'll say, almost about a half lap in to this first lap of tonight's contest.
Jesse Webb settling into about the 3rd position, and he's all over the back end of John Wittendorf, coming up over what is easily going to be one of the trickier spots on the racetrack, just because you come right over that hill, right into a braking zone. You've got to get the car turned, settled, and ready to go back going. This is going to be the run towards Arenberg in a moment, and this is the first test of all these guys' skills, I think, on the twisty mountain kind of racetrack. And here we go, Arenberg. This is what's going to be challenging, and there we go, Wittendorf. Oh my goodness!
And it looks like Wittendorf just completely might have missed the braking zone or had a miscue under braking. And due to the fact that there's no fast repairs in this series, that's most likely going to spark the end of the day, because he's going to have about probably 12 or 13 miles to get all the way back to the pit lane, or he'll have to elect to take a lengthy tow here to get back onto the pit lane. And we'll see coming over the hill at Shine Cruz is what this corner is, into Arenberg. Looks like he runs a little bit wide. Fortunately, not taking out race leader Chris Beets. That could have proved absolutely deadly to our leader.
One of the things that we've talked about many times this season, but have not talked about tonight, Chris Beets and Jesse Webb, not only are they the only drivers to win this season, they're the only drivers to finish either 1st or 2nd in each race so far in 2021. That crash nearly took Chris Beets out of contention on the first lap of this 2-hour event. That would have been huge as far as the championship is concerned, and somehow, even after that major shunt by Wittendorf, Jesse Webb has closed up to within 0.4 of a second here as we're on board with Beets the leader, and he's the one who has to set the pace. He has no car in front of him to work off of as far as how deep he needs to be going into some of these corners that he may not have been able to figure out just yet, considering his personal amount of allotted time that he's invested on getting to know this circuit in and out. The only barometer that he has as far as where to get on and off the brakes and where to get back to the power is what he's been able to learn and absorb in his preparation for this event. While Webb's got a little bit of an advantage by being the chaser, he could utilize that car ahead as his judgment as to when he needs to slow that car down and get it pointed. And I think that's what's allowing him to close up and keep within pace of the driver that he's literally chasing, not only in this race, but in the championship as well.
And you can see the trees getting in front of a lot of our shots here. That's going to be the beauty of covering this race. An hour and 55 minutes to go. We're going to see a whole lot of green, as we do on Jesse Webb's number 94. And it's been a wild season to this point so far. A lot of big incidents, a lot of moments to talk about. But when it comes down to drivers to talk about for a championship, as we talked about in the in the Open with the standings, it's just these two. It's so incredible to me. A season ago, we still had a few different guys. We knew it was Garrett D'Alessandro, John Wittendorf, Chris Brunnemer, those three mainly. But Brady Lubenow, he was in the conversation. James Hansen was up there. It's come down to these two newbies to the series. They are just so good compared to everybody else that this is who we're talking about. That said, if anybody is come through the carousel here, the first carousel on the racetrack, if anybody's going to be able to say something about the championship hopes, it's going to have to start now. I don't think they can do it in just the back half of the season, but if they're going to, it has to start this evening.
It's going to be incredibly tough for anyone behind the top two, just because you go back to third place, Chris Brunnemer in the championship, and it's about a full race's worth of points that stands between him and the top two. Top two only separated by 3 points, and the story remains the same here. They still run 1 and 2, and Chris Beets, he's the one that has definitely been on a tear. If you're looking at both Jesse Webb and Chris Beets here in the series, here in the middle portion of the season at least, but the Nurburgring, it can be quite dangerous, and there's still a lot that these guys are going to have to go through over what's still an hour and 54 minutes here around this racetrack.
And believe it or not, we have yet to complete this first lap of competition, and there are a couple of drivers who already had some bad luck. We saw John Whitendorf have his off while running in second place. You see Alexander King, Randall Ayers, and also Constantino appear to have not been able to, at least at this point, get on the racetrack in competition. We did see one car peel off coming to the green. We'll wait maybe a little while to see if we do see those drivers who are getting repaired. Maybe they're going to join the session a couple of laps in. But right now, the leaders are going to be approaching the start-finish line for the first time, and this appears to be a point on the racetrack where Beets is able to flex his muscle. Ooh, you saw Jesse Webb there flirt with the left side of his car, nearly getting into the grass line there, and Whitendorf already proved how detrimental that could be in one's race here tonight. You don't have to get offline too much, but if it's in the wrong sector of the racetrack, and if you're going at just the right pace and just the right speed, it could redirect that car rather abruptly, and you can see the Armco barriers on each side of this racing venue is not all that forgiving, especially with a lot of the pack still kind of relatively packed up tight, with the top 8 being covered by less than 10 seconds, top 3 covered by less than 1 second. On board with Brady Lubenow, who's on this long straightaway. That is an indication that we are approaching the completion of this first lap, and also approaching a good opportunity for the next passing zone. We'll see what Lubenow elects to do in the slipstream here as he is trying to close up on Webb for that runner-up spot. As we're getting set to come around a complete lap 1, here comes Webb for the lead. Lubenow thought about going 3 wide. He's going to follow Webb through, and the battle for the lead rages on to the heartbreaking left-hander ahead.
Very surprised these guys are racing this hard on just lap 1. That said, they are almost 10 minutes in. Still, beyond surprised that Webb pulled out and made the pass this early, considering what could have been, especially if Brady had decided to make that move and go 3 wide coming up to the end of the lap. But that was just 1 lap here at the Nurburgring. We are in for something very interesting over the course of the next hour and 51 into the Yokohama S and the Mercedes Arena for the second time, just the second time so far this race. And Jesse Webb looking very strong. And you mentioned how you've got to be on it every moment of this race. You cannot allow yourself to make a mistake, because whether you're around somebody or not, and these guys, of course, the top 5 actually all very close together, you have got to make sure that for your own sake and everybody around you, you do not go breaking on the grass like unfortunately Whitendorf did into Arnbergen last time through. You've got to be so precise, and you've really, in my opinion, you've got to just lay back. And if you get a position by somebody messing up, all right. But I don't think you want to make a pass here in the first 5 or so laps of this race. I think you just want to wait and get through a pit cycle, and then you could start going for it. If an opportunity presents itself on the GP course, that's one thing. But once you turn back onto the Nordschleife, I'm just not so sure I would do it myself. And the flash there from Lubenow, I think that was more so maybe saying you're good to race. I don't think that was to get out of my way. If anything, it might have been mind games, as JP Costa always reminds us, that Brady Lubenow maybe just trying to get in the head of Jesse Webb and maybe force that mistake. But honestly, after the mistake we saw from Whitendorf, I don't think Brady wants to force that out of Jesse Webb.
Yeah, I like what you said, Andrew, about not wanting to do anything too risky early in the running, especially if you're these guys that are pretty high up in the championship picture, just because it would be very high risk and very low return. Actually, that was a very masterful maneuvering of that section of the circuit. But no, as you said, there's not a lot of runoff, and even the portions of the circuit that are designed for modern Grand Prix racing, a lot of the corners don't necessarily have a lot of runoff sections of the circuit like you might see at, say, Spa, where we were just a couple weeks ago. And the other thing, I definitely like what we saw on the back straightaway just a couple minutes ago. It almost reminded me of drafting battles that you would see in Global MX-5 Miatas, and if these guys do remain in the slipstream, it might allow a little bit of opportunity to practice and see where the optimum position is going to be on the last lap if you are in the bubble of, say, 2 or 3 cars on the last lap, if we do have that pack.
That's an excellent point, Trey. Oh, wow, Lubenow there almost had a bobble right where Whitendorf crashed on the opening lap, it looked like.
Yeah, that's Arnberg again, Eric.
Good catch there, Andrew. So we saw there just how treacherous that could be. I don't know if the common thread there is being second in line at that portion of the racetrack and having a bit of a tow at your disposal. But, Trey, I'm with you. I think that even though we are not quite sure how many pit stops we're going to see, we can expect at the very least, maybe 3 on the night, depending on how these drivers maybe calculate their fuel. For some, it could be a 2-stop strategy, and they'll just be very tight or running, a very dialed-back fuel number towards the end of this race. But if we do have the top two, or any two for that matter, battling for position, like we see a couple of tandems that have broken out here with a two-car battle up front for the lead, and also closing up in the fourth spot is starting to be that of Curtis Jones. That's a name that we have not talked about yet in the front runners at this point in the race, and he is starting to apply some pressure to the early leader in Chris Beats. And as you're on board with Jones here, as he catches a little bit of curbing with the right side tires, you can see just how much he has caught up on the front runners, and he may be in that prime position to take advantage of that slipstream on that long straightaway that leads you up to the final few corners to complete what is eventually going to be the end of lap number 2. So far it's Webb, Lubenow, Beach, Jones, Hansen, your top 5.
Yeah, Curtis Jones looking good, but the whole top 5, I'd say, is looking good. The interesting thing, and Trey's kind of picking up on this as we get into the town of Nevada now. Trey kind of mentioned that it's looking like Spec Miata racing down the Dottingerhof. That's because it's basically Ferrari Challenge up front. We've got 5 Ferraris. Let's see what 6th place is in. Well, that's our first BMW on the race course. Go back to 7th place. It's another Ferrari, Michael Rudebusch. 8th, how about this? Trevor Anderson, a pioneer almost in one of the BMWs. 9th, going to be Sven Hartmann in a BMW. 10th, David Flanagan in a BMW. Just 2 manufacturers represented in this top 10. It's insane how many drivers opted to take the small little penalty to make the switch into a Ferrari this afternoon.
Yeah, there's as you said, Andrew, it's pretty heavily Ferraris up front, a little bit of BMWs, but otherwise I think we only see one McLaren entry, one lone McLaren entry that is, one lone Ford for the first time this season, and one of the Mercedes AMG cars. So it does give an indication as to what car drivers think is the most efficient here around the Nürburgring as this battle up front just continues to tighten. And we mentioned it a little bit earlier, but a lot of guys did elect to take their one buy, if you will, and go for the car that isn't their preferred manufacturer for the entire season. You get one opportunity throughout the season to go to a car that is not yours. So a lot of these guys are conventionally in the Audi R8 or the Lamborghini Huracan. But no, and as you said, Andrew, just a lot of Ferraris.
Yeah, and one thing I started to notice there was the fact that Lubenow, while running in the slipstream to that of Jesse Webb, kind of flashing the lights at him a little bit there. Maybe a little bit of an intimidating tactic, trying to get in Webb's head a little bit. You know, we talk about the fact that we've only had 2 drivers go to victory lane so far this season, and Webb and Beats, who were penciled in by you, Trey Shuttlesworth, in one of the preseason write-ups you did for us on the platform, as drivers to watch, and they've lived up to the expectation to the highest capacity. But with that in mind, you still have the likes of Lubenow and Jones and Hansen, who, you know, you normally would expect to run up front, especially with some of those competitors running so well in the last season of competition. A reminder that Hansen was runner-up in the championship standings last year. Brunnemer was 3rd, Lubenow 4th. So names which we thought we would keep our eyes on, who have proven their solid results so far this season, have been running quite well, but not being able to find victory lane, and in some cases struggling to really find a podium. It appears with time starting to run out and the hourglass starting to tick by, these drivers are starting to acknowledge the fact that this may be one of their best chances to get the job done. And Lubenow is so far, granted it's early, we're 15 minutes into what is a 2-hour event here at the Nürburgring. So far, Lubenow is looking that he has enough strength to try to get up, perhaps even around Jesse Webb. And if he does make that pass, especially with that long straightaway approaching shortly...
Oh, the carousel going to catch him off. And the second carousel going to get to Brady Lubenow. That's a hard impact. He almost collects the passing James Hansen. That's going to be a tough one for Brady Lubenow to come back from. That was hard into the retaining wall. And, man, this number 11 is not going to handle right. I wouldn't be surprised to see him pit this lap and actually try and go off of a 2-stop strategy from there. If he pits here, he can run 5 laps in the next 2 runs and try and stretch it out. Man, that was a really, really hard hit in the Client's Carousel. We're going to stay with Brady Lubenow to see what he does at this point, because I would not be surprised to see him pit. Thankfully, he kept going, unlike Tyler Langenberg and Alan Roth. We'll check in on them in a moment and see what might have happened to them, because it looks like they've had to tow. And the tow here, well, let's see, Randall Ayers, I think, is still trying to tow. It's been 10 minutes. It's insane how long the tow is here at Nürburgring. You've really got to see if you can keep going. That said, if you keep going and your car is just complete garbage after that, well, you're posing a risk to your own race and everybody else's around you, so you've got to feel that out and be smart about that. Lubenow going to stay out. And it looks like the car's handling okay. It looks like he'll continue on without hurting his race or anybody else's even further. A purple lap there from Curtis Jones, and my bad. The Ferrari comment from Trey Shellsworth a moment ago is just it rings true with me. I'm glad he picked up on it because it's feeling like a Mazda Miata race, honestly, because you've got you had 5 Ferraris up front. Lubenow might get passed up here by Wade Hayes soon in our first of the 3 BMWs I believe we have in the top 10. Otherwise, it really is just Ferrari challenge up in the front. I can't say I'm necessarily surprised. I mean, the Ferrari has been the most stable car for a while. But one thing that is going to be an interesting dynamic is, I mean, these guys are setting their car choice now for the rest of the season, Eric. Brady Lubenow around again. Lubenow not having a fun time. But what I want to get at is the fact that these guys are picking their cars for the rest of the season now. This is really going to hurt some of the manufacturer conversation where sometimes a Lamborghini is better in corners, a BMW is better on straightaways, for example. You're not going to have that necessary variation. It's going to be a whole lot of Ferraris and BMWs now throughout the entire field, and you're just not going to have the same differences.
Yeah, and I wonder if, looking at the schedule going forward, we see Sebring International Raceway, Phillip Island, Suzuka, a lot of tracks where, while they have high-speed straightaways, they can still be very corner-reliant. And while the BMW might be a little bit of a whiz in a straight line, the Ferrari is definitely a car that excels in cornering, as you mentioned, Andrew. So I have to wonder if that is a lot of the motivation, as well as the fact that we're here at the Nordschleife here, which is outside of the Deininger Hove. The back straightaway is a series of low, high, and medium speed corners where you're going to want a car that's proficient in cornering.
At this point, I think I need to send an apology out to Brady Lubenow, because I think that's about the 3rd time that I've announced or jinxed somebody on this thing, just as we were talking about how strong he was running. And if I'm Chris Beets, I'm probably a little bit worried running in 2nd spot, because that's been the trouble position to be in at this point. As we're on board with Brunnemer, who is trying to make up some ground after a very uncharacteristic qualifying effort by that driver, who is 3rd in the championship standings, but started way out back at the field, trying to work his way further forward. Long way to go. We're about 20 minutes into this contest, 2 hours the length, and we may, in the not-too-distant future, be starting to wonder, perhaps in about 2 laps or so, if pit stops are going to be on the horizon for some of the front runners. And we do know that Webb and Beets remain close to about 0.6 of a second, but we're watching all this heavy racing that is going on throughout the pack. And we talk about Brunnemer. He's already up to 15th starting position, trying to pick up a spot here on Gavin Cohn of the BMW, who's overstepped his boundaries in the corners a couple of times. You see him run off there with the left side tires in the grass a couple of corners ago, and that's how close to the edge of disaster these drivers are being on what is a very challenging racetrack here at the Nurburgring. And now on board with Cohn, looking back at Brunnemer, who's filling up the rearview mirror heavily, especially considering the fact that there's a bit of distance starting to build from Cohn up to the next driver in Allen, who holds down 13th spot. So Brunnemer's ready to roll, and right now Cohn is trying to fend him off for a position battle that is outside the top 10 for the time being, and it looks as though more problems for Brady Lubenow. He's going to go around for the 2nd time on this lap. The driver who started 3rd was up to 2nd, now down to 10th, but that is his 3rd incident of the night.
Big problems for Brady Lubenow. I was about to say that Gavin Cohn was scaring me a bit with some of his tendencies trying to get around this place, and unfortunately Brady Lubenow battling some damage around again. The car just gets out from underneath him. I wouldn't be surprised if these guys are running a little bit lower downforce than they maybe want to. I mean, you got to consider they've got to fly down the Dottinger Hove, for example. You've got to be fast. That said, you've got to balance being fast with being able to make it through the corners, and I'm not sure if that's suspension damage that's got him off guard or if that was just downforce. And you know what? It could be a combination of damage and downforce in case he damaged that rear wing going into that. Now he'll head out of the town of Adenau, and he will head down to about the back half of the speedway. I say speedway, it's hardly a speedway. It's a mountain drive. I do want to mention, though, the car behind, because this is the first time we have seen one of these cars all season long. We saw one in the inaugural race that we covered of the Northwest GT3 Challenge at the time. It's a Ford, boys. We have the meme car itself in the field. Alexander Veldman is among those racing this evening at the Nurburgring. This is cool to see, but also you got to chuckle a little bit.
You definitely have to, have a bit of a grin about it, but he's doing a lot to keep consistent pace, and he's survived the attrition in the first 20 minutes of the running so far, so definitely doing a good job for what is soon probably going to be a legacy piece of content. I know it's not available in the IMSA series anymore, and in fact, we're down to 2 GT3 cars there. Don't believe it's available on the European side of things either, so it's definitely a car that's seeing its waning days on the iRacing.com service. Definitely awesome to see it getting a fair run here in 11th place. And with a little bit more attrition, we've seen struggles for the likes of Brady Lubenow, who's already in 10th place. He's around again. Moved the Ford GT into the 10th position, and there is a tow for Lubenow coming out of the carousel.
That was a smart tow as well.
Wow, it just unraveled for Lubenow. I mean, that was his third spin of the lap, fourth incident that we were able to document of the race after running as high as second and clearly possibly having one of his best runs of the season by far. On board with Lubenow. And I want to kind of lean on something that Andrew Cardinale IV mentioned, although that looked like he caught too much of the curbing there. It not necessarily curbing or rumble stripping, but definitely a transition from that banked left-handed corner to the flat portion where they hug the apex of the turn. But I'm with you, Andrew Cardinale IV. I think that the combination of the damage he sustained by virtue of his first impact, plus the potential downforce settings that he had on that car, which was kind of proven when he was in the draft while running in third and nearly went 3 wide for the lead at the conclusion of lap 1. I think that's all kind of culminated to what has turned into a nightmare scenario for Lubenow here tonight, who entered this evening pretty stable so far in the championship standings, I would say, but the opportunity to make up ground appears to be slipping away from him. But we've still got, despite being nearly a quarter of the way into this race, we've still got great racing going on all throughout the pack, including some of these battles that we see here, including this battle for the race lead. Beats up on this straightaway, now going to be in the draft. And look at Jesse Webb trying to bob and weave to kind of break up that draft like what you would see on a super speedway with a stock car, because he knows how efficient this draft could be, and Beats has a monster run and still has an opportunity to close up and maybe make a move to get by for the lead.
Well, Trey was keen to mention that I call the first carousel, the Caracciola carousel, NASCAR sometimes because it's so heavily banked, and actually that plays into talking about Brady Lubenow, but you mentioned he's bobbing and weaving his Jesse Webb. He's playing Pied Piper like Dale Jr. at Daytona or Talladega, but no, it might come down to the damage. It might also just come down to the mental toll that those initial couple of incidents took there on Brady Lubenow. Regardless, big problems for him, going to be caught way out of this thing, and I'm with you. I think he just caught too much of the inside, but you know what? That's why I call that corner NASCAR, because it's banked, first of all, but also you can get down there on that flat bit and de-wedge the car very easily and spin out very easily. You can also jump that cushion almost like a dirt track and suddenly really get the car in a whole lot of problems just the same. You've got to run that very fine line, and it's almost worth it to just take it a bit slower. If somebody hits you, well, I guess they hit you. But you got to keep your race alive in 8-minute laps. You've really got to keep your car alive. Jesse Webb going to lead us into the cut-through here to take the sprint course, and we're still on board with Chris Beats as we do so. This is the cut-through before we get to turn 5 and take the Ford Dunlop curves and the Schumacher S, and now we get back to the Bilstein curve.
Yeah, at the end of the day, Lubenow is a good example of just ensuring that you keep your car clean. And what you said, Andrew, it could have been issues with handling of the car, but this is also, it's a massive circuit, so any break in your rhythm is definitely going to not pay dividends, the opposite of dividends, actually, in the long run here, just because it's so critical that you stay in the zone at a racetrack like this, where it can be so difficult to get the muscle memory down. The focus absolutely has to be on maximum. We're going to go on board with Corey Peters, where we're seeing a absolute gaggle of cars here in the midfield. He's found his way up into the 14th position right now, right around where he did make his start of the race, and he is one of the lone Lamborghini representatives after a lot of people like to go with a different manufacturers here at this round of the Nurburgring.
Yeah, Peters and other drivers were putting together some very solid results as we've gotten into the latter portion of the season. And The name attrition is starting to pop up. And even though Peters right now is 14, trying to catch BC Voigt, who holds down 13 just ahead of him. You see the battles there within the top 10, or I should say just outside the top 10. Kind of continuing to rage on. You're on board now with Gavin Cohn looking back here at the competition with Brunnemer still unable to get around that BMW. Brunnemer, though, continuing to charge his way further up through the pack as we are entering the 25% mark as far as elapsed time in this race. And the first potential pit stop could be a couple laps out with Webb and Beets leading this pack. Now, even though those two drivers have, in fact, split duties as far as total amount of wins on the season, or we'll just say total wins, period, across the season, the last time that these two were running this close at the end of a race was at Imola 2 weeks ago, where those two pretty much swapped the lead about 3 times in the latter stages. And Andrew Cardinale IV brought up a great point. The last time through as they head down the straightaway, even though that it appeared that Beets had a huge run there, he used the term playing the Pied Piper, good soldier, just maybe wasn't in a position to try to push that envelope too far. However, Webb has started to gap Beets a little bit here on the racetrack as that margin is now up to about 1.5 seconds from the leader in Webb back to Beets. We should also point out, although this is not the biggest indication of a driver's success or ensuing success that would come on the night, Beets did have the field handedly covered for the duration of the 1 hour and 40-minute practice session that came before qualifying tonight. Now, it wasn't just that he had a great run up until he was knocked off the top of the pylon by Weitendorf. He had a nearly about 1/2 second advantage, or I should say nearly a full second advantage over Chris Beets on the stopwatch of the practice session. Thought that may have been a bit of a statement. Maybe he wants to try to stop this wave of momentum that Beets has been on up at this point in the season with his back-to-back wins and as the new point leader. But I'm not sure that that is what is going to truly upset the ride that Beets has been on. And the roles appear to be now reversed, with Beets continuing to apply the pressure, at least remaining relevant in the rearview mirror of Jesse Webb's car, but with still such a long way to go.
We're coming up to Bergwerk, and I mean, the gap is getting no narrower. They're still quite a ways apart, and I'm not sure that it's going to get narrower. Now we're into Bergwerk here before we take our, well, one of our last plunges of the lap into just a straight, not necessarily straight section, but very flat out. You've got to maximize your time on throttle here. You're going to want to lift. Your brain is going to tell you to lift, but you've got to just stay in it. In fact, we can go on board with Wade Hayes as he comes up on this. And actually, Wade Hayes up into 4th position as our top BMW. Some of the Ferrari is up ahead having problems, but you know what? That BMW is holding steady, boys, as he sits in 4th position. His high will adjust, I'm sure, as he comes across the start-finish line. And again, your brain is going to tell you to lift. You can only lift enough to just stay on the pavement. Your brain's going to tell you to brake as well in some of these because you don't really see where you're going. You've got to just learn the racetrack and learn where your car needs to be and about how fast you need to enter and exit these little kinks along this stretch. Then you come up into that curve. I believe we're coming up to your mutt curve. And this should be, no, this is a closer tall that will take us into the I'm trying to keep up the corner names. Caracciolo. I call it NASCAR. It's the carousel, the first carousel.
Yeah, and this is where we also get to a portion of the circuit where, in real life, a lot of spectators get to view events on the VLN circuit, whether it be the Nurburgring 24 or a VLN endurance event. And as you said a little bit earlier, Andrew, there's a lot of high and medium speed corners, and it's a very rhythm-heavy portion of the racetrack. A lot of chances to lose time, and a lot of places where you can potentially go off. But there's also a lot of corners where you have a lot of curbing and even a slight amount of runoff on exit. So it's all about how you're able to utilize this section of the circuit. It's also critical because if you come out of there with good pace, you could be in a position to easily slipstream past your opponent going on the back straightaway, or what otherwise might be known as Donninger Hove. So we go through the carousel this time with Gavin Cohn. We did watch him a little bit earlier, and he was definitely pushing on the limit, but for the time being, he's relatively controlled about it.
Yeah, and that was the first opportunity that I got to see, truly how big that drop-off is heading down into the carousel. It almost reminds you, and now I totally understand why Andrew elects to call it NASCAR, it totally reminds you of the drop-off of, like, when you're going into turn number 1 at Dover, where the left-hand side of the car just kind of falls over as you kind of sink into the bank. Oh, no! Hard into the wall after misjudging the right-handed corner and then burying that BMW in the guardrail.
I'm going to try and work through about where we are on the circuit here. So we're a little ways out of the Caracciolo carousel. This might be into Hole Oct or High 8. No, I think it's a little further down. This might be into possibly maybe Eschbach, maybe. It's hard to say exactly, but this is in that very technical back portion of the racetrack, and it's about, I think that was the 18-kilometer marker. He's just too far into the corner. Like, he just runs too deep into it. That's textbook how to mess up. I think that might have been Eschbach where he took that hard hit. He had a mistake of some sort prior, because he had actually fallen back where he was battling with John McClintock. He had fallen into about the 16th position, Gavin Cohn had. So big problems there for somebody who looked like he was going to get into the top 10 very soon. In fact, his position's now been replaced by Chris Brunnemer, and he's got company a little ways back from BC Voigt and Corey Peters, but I'm not sure exactly what happened to Gavin Cohn. Something caught him out, and that may have played into why he just made that mistake and really crashed his car. As we now look at Corey Peters and BC Voigt down the Dottinger Hove as Jesse Webb goes purple.
And these two drivers right now battling for 12th place on the racetrack. Both drivers that have made their presences known in the midfield throughout much of the season with flashes of brilliance. And now we get to see them absolutely drag race heading into the last component of the circuit here. What will be Hunter Ryan, rather, when they get to the last couple of corners, and then it will be back to the front straightaway. So it looks like Peters doesn't quite have the run. We do see on the pit lane, James Hansen, one of the front runners, down onto the pit lane. Have to wonder if this is formally opening the pit cycles, or if he potentially had some issues causing him to come down onto the pit lane.
Yeah, I happened to notice Hansen abruptly fell down the running order as we were watching the footage of what may have happened to that of Gavin Cohn. So not sure if this is in fact a tipping point. Normally in our sprint races that are about 60 minutes in length, usually 75% fuel load, this is about the window in which we would start seeing the potential of some pit stops. Maybe we still got about another 10 minutes or so we'll call it another lap before we may start seeing some of the front runners elect to dive onto the pit lane here for service. As we have eclipsed the quarter mark of this event, I want to remind everybody you're watching round number 7 of the 2021 Pacific Challenge GT3 Series, and our broadcast is presented by a number of partners who have jumped on board with Pit Stop TV in a huge capacity and a number of ways. And it's because of these incredible businesses that you see here on your screen that we are able to bring you this coverage of this 2-hour affair. We want to remind you that our broadcasts tonight are brought to you by Tucson Sound Art, your picture, your music. And don't forget that if you want to check out their products and services, use the promo code PITSTOPTV at checkout for 10% off your order. We also want to remind you that our broadcast is brought to you by Race Pace. You can pick up the pace with Race Pace, a community-driven setup shop and driver development program. We're also brought to you by Permanent Makeup in Maine, because you deserve the best care that money can buy. And finally, we are brought to you by Whiplash Media, the official graphic and camera provider of Pit Stop TV. We also want to take this opportunity to thank some of the league partners as well, who are heavily responsible for not only some additional incentive as to what these drivers are racing for towards the end of the season, but also all that they do in preparation for the events, of which include Benke Cinematography, which is headed up by Damian Benke, part-time competitor in the Pacific Challenge GT3 Series. Also, liveries by Sarah Rabb, who Sarah is in tonight's race, currently scored back in the 17th spot, as Sarah may have had an off. She's been catching fire as of late as far as the results and climbing up the championship standings. Is Sarah Rabb. There she is currently on the pit lane. Sarah Rabb, who is providing a number of liveries for competitors. We're going to take a look here to see what happened to Sarah. And we also want to remind everybody that the GT3 Series is also presented by the league partner Tam Livery. Here's Sarah Rabb coming onto the pit lane at a high rate of speed, so it does appear that this was a voluntary trip to the pit lane and not a tow into the pit area for service. So we'll see where Sarah cycles out, as that may be one of the first moves for some of the drivers who've been able to keep it clean throughout this race to come down for service, as we are inching closer, albeit slowly, to the halfway point, with Webb starting to extend that lead.
We now look at BC Voigt, in fact, on board with the driver of the 64 car out of the Northwest. Corey Peters is the next car just ahead. You see that very neon Lamborghini up there. One of the few Lamborghinis in the field now. And I actually thought if you can set this car up, it's quite a nice car to drive, the Lamborghini is. I'm very surprised that so few drivers are still left in it. In fact, you can head over to Pit Stop TV partner Race Pace to get you some Lamborghini setups and get yourself some very stable setups. I can speak from experience on that, Trey Shuttlesworth as well. They feel good, and quite honestly, I was driving one earlier here to get the camera set up. I thought it felt great. I'm really surprised everybody's left this car as well. The Lamborghini is really well balanced despite being a bit on edge like the Audi used to be. I don't know, it's going to keep being a talking point now. It's so incredible to me. We had so many Lamborghinis up in the front, and they've all now switched. A whole bunch of Ferraris up there. But Corey Peters, one of the best of the Ferraris left in the field. We do want to mention, as we head into the town of Adenau, that we have some information about what happened to James Hansen. He got meatballed at some point, got the meatball flag, the black flag with the orange circle in the center. 11 minutes of repairs, and Brady Lubenow, who had those issues, it's a good thing he crashed when he did, apparently, because his internet service cut out shortly thereafter, and I mentioned this during the BRP broadcast, guys. Serious thoughts and best wishes go out to everybody dealing with some of the winter weather across the country and across the world, I'm sure. It's been a bit scary lately. It looks like we'll have to cover BC Voigt here in a moment. He's even gone over into a Ferrari, but in fact, I'm stepping in here for Emerson Arden, who would usually take you through our Pacific GT3 coverage. Well, he's even fallen victim to this stuff. Power outage in the Arctic tundra of Houston, Texas. So it's certainly a widespread thing, and best wishes to everybody getting caught out by this. If you've got no power in the cold for a couple of days, just no internet, man, it's tough.
Yeah, it's unfortunate to see, but at the end of the day, we just have to do our best to persevere, and hope to see Emerson back on tomorrow. And if that's not possible, I mean, just later in the week, we'll see Emerson. Absolutely love to have him on board with our broadcast here at Pit Stop TV. We're going to go back on board with BC Voigt, still tailing the leading car of Corey Peters. They still remain within the 12th and 13th position. I believe half a lap ago, though, it was the opposite, as in Peters was the chaser coming down the back straightaway onto the paddock straightaway, if you will.
So we're on board with BC Voigt here to kind of take a look at how this transpired, and not missing anything up front, being that the margin continues to be just under 2 seconds or so. And one concept that I had here is we were kind of looking into tonight's race. Had an opportunity last season to kind of follow along with the Sports Car Club of Americas in their F3 and F4 series. And I had a long conversation with Dan Hellman about Linus Lundqvist, who's a name that's going to be making his Indy Lights debut in the upcoming season. And he likened Linus's approach to his on-track activity to that of IndyCar champion Scott Dixon, in that he is coached in a way where he would go out on a racetrack, whether it be Barber or even Sebring, where we're going to be at with this series next week, and he would attack each corner individually. You really don't have that option here at the Nurburgring. The time is not allotted for you to be able to go out, learn, master, and eventually perfect every corner with your race car, and then multiply that effort by the differing circumstances: full fuel load, light fuel load, long duration run on your tires and whatnot, in traffic, out of traffic. These drivers do not have that opportunity here like they do on virtually every other race on the slate for the Pacific Challenge GT3 Series, and thus the reason why this is pretty much the biggest wildcard event of the season. Earlier in the year, we were at the street course at the Grand Prix Detroit of Belle Isle circuit. We thought that to be the biggest wildcard at the beginning of the season, but this for sure is going to take the cake here, as you almost liken it to, say, rally racing, because you don't really know what you're getting into here. But what we do know is we are getting into the window of pit stops. So mark it down. With an hour and 20 minutes to go, Jesse Webb, the leader, is on the pit lane for service. That's 40 minutes into the contest. That would mean that he would have, at the very least, one more stop left. But that would also mean he's going to be super close on fuel at the end of this thing if he doesn't dial it back.
little bit. I apologize. I'm working in production and commentary. It's a bit of a different role for me. We were talking about how all these guys are coming in right at 40 minutes into the contest here, Trey. And James Hansen was telling us a little bit about how, well, these guys might be able to go 6, and we're seeing Chris Beats do that, along with Curtis Jones, Wade Hayes, David Flanagan. But realistically, it's a 5-lap pit window, or I guess fuel run, you could say, and that's about it. Otherwise, you're really working with really stretching it on maybe a fuel map, possibly just lifting early. It's really up to the driver on how they want to try and save that extra fuel. Otherwise, you come in after 5 laps, it's about 40 minutes, especially 40 minutes exactly almost for Jesse Webb. Brings you right to that cusp of making it on just 2 stops. It's the best strategy if you can make it work, but if you're having to run fuel map 1 or whatever it may be in that car, you might just have to sacrifice a lap or so and make an extra pit stop if you're trying to go off of speed, but I just don't think that's the idea here. You've got to make sure you can get around these corners. You can see, I will say, over fluke plots, this 33 was looking nice and planted. That's a place that some of these cars can get caught out. A very similar transition here down to the transition to Arenberg, where you come up over that crest, and you can certainly lose the car. In fact, we saw John Whitendorf do exactly that.
Yeah, Andrew, we're definitely seeing that the Ferrari, with the right setup and the right combination of, well, the setup and the driver, it could be an incredibly snug car through the cornering, and that's just something that it has an excellent reputation for. And as we continue to hit on, we're seeing so many drivers elect to go with the Ferrari here, and that's probably a good reason why, just because this is a track that's incredibly difficult to memorize. A lot of varying corners in terms of difficulty, speed at which you take the corner, all around. It's just an incredibly unique challenge, unlike anything else within motorsport. But no, just to talk a little bit more about what's really going to shake things up in the race, which is pitch strategy. If you do the math and break it up evenly at this point, it'll be a pit at 40 minutes and a pit at 80 minutes in what is a 120-minute race. So in theory, you would think, okay, we'll be good enough to make it home. But you do have to wonder if, with how long a lap could take around here, and say you get the white flag with 1 or 2 minutes left, that could be an additional lap, and that's where things could get a little bit sketchy for some of these drivers, where if you're able to stretch it in an additional lap, maybe you do get a chance for that to pay off in the long run for all of that fuel saving that you have to do.
Yeah, great points about how the fuel equations are going to kind of unfold here over the next few laps or so. We see some of the drivers like that of Patrick Herring, who are on the pit lane, Tyler Langenberg, who was in the pits earlier tonight, now still on the pit lane as well. Alan Roth has rejoined the field. He's currently 24th after an earlier race incident. You see a little bit of damage there on the front end of Alan Roth's car. The Miracle, who always has people watching him in his iRacing escapades and forays, and this is definitely probably one of the most challenging races that he will do this season, and nevertheless still keeping it on track and keeping it going for the most part here, even though Roth has scored 3 laps down, back in 24th spot, as we are on board with him now, waiting to see what may happen at the front of the field with the remaining pit stops on the line. So we have it documented that Webb came into the pit lane with about an hour and 20 minutes or so to go. We're expecting Beats to possibly make a similar move here at the conclusion of this lap, with Jones and Hayes a provisional podium for the time being, but we've already begun this pit stop cycle. Now, gentlemen, I will pose the question, being that this is, there are multiple cars to choose from. We saw a number of drivers elect to switch their respective vehicles for this race. And a lot of them are starting to have to kind of consider what they're going to do for the remainder of the season. But when it comes to fuel mileage, especially when we're running 75% capacity as far as the fuel load, are there any benefits, even from an aerodynamic perspective, in trying to conserve fuel to one particular car over another? Or is that one element that in the sim is a relative constant?
Well, usually in these races where your strategy isn't all that important into your race finish, you're just going for what gives you the best speed, and that's why you saw guys going for a variety of cars. They could each try and do their own thing and find speed where they could in each different car, and I think that is the beauty of having the option of manufacturers. Otherwise, you just have, as I hate on stock cars real quick, you just have stock cars where they're ideally, at least on iRacing, they are the same thing. They're coded the same, they look different, but they're all coded the same because they're ones and zeros. So you got to consider that difference. These manufactured cars, the Ferraris, BMWs, Lamborghinis and such, they are different despite just being ones and zeros. That said, I'm just not so sure we're going to have the manufacturer conversation come up as much. The BMWs, they haul down straightaways because they're that age-old formula of front engine car, rear-wheel drive, and just go. The reason the Ferrari is so balanced is it's able to attack the corners. It's got the mid-engine, and it changes that balance up a little bit to be a bit more lively in the corners, but I've heard a lot of people say it handles like a front-engine car. It handles so planted, you don't even notice it's mid-engined. Just something about this Ferrari 488 recipe is really, really good for GT racing, apparently. I suppose that's why everybody's taking it on iRacing right now. And, iRacing tries to battle that as we see race leader head into the second carousel. That's Chris Beets. And he'll come onto the Dottinger Hove in a moment. We'll see him pit shortly thereafter. But I think at this point, it just comes down to trying to find the best setup and trying to play the race the best, especially now that we have our two championship contenders both in a Ferrari. Unfortunately, a great conversation kind of put to bed by the Green Monster. It's just... You know what? Props to these racing drivers. They are doing what they have to do to try and win the race, but it does unfortunately hurt a dynamic of the season that we've been talking about.
Yeah, it is just unfortunate to see. But no, as you were saying a little bit about the Ferrari, it seems like, as opposed to some of its other counterparts in the GT3 ranks on the iRacing.com service, it's a car that's been consistently well received in terms of participation within the car. And as you said, despite the fact that it is a mid-engine car, it is incredibly planted in cornering. And oftentimes, I think you can compensate for where it might be a little bit deficient on straightaways with some of its competitors, whether that be the Mercedes-AMG GT3 or the newer BMW M4, I believe, is the new BMW entry within the GT3 ranks. But no, all around, it's just a very consistent car, and I think that is definitely what makes it popular. Even if it's a car that's somewhat mid-range in terms of its lifespan here on the iRacing.com service, as we see a couple more leaders come down on the pit road, in particular, race leader Chris Beets with the likes of Wade Hayes and Curtis Jones accompanying him, and it'll also be David Flanagan in the 4th position.
So it looks as though just about every car that elected not to pit the first time through, with an hour and 20 minutes still to go on the board, is going to come through this lap. So there is about a 1 lap or an 8-minute difference as far as pit stop time that we notice between your top 2 drivers in Jesse Webb and Chris Beets. Now the question is Webb going to be able to overtake Beets while he is getting set to come off the racing venue for surface? Beets has already been released from the pit lane, so he's going to rejoin the track here on the approach to the first corner, with Webb now on the straightaway, and it looks as though at first glance the overcut may be the better option here at this point right now for Beets. Now he's going to be just getting back up to speed here, but he's got Webb cleared. Going to wait for timing and scoring to finish cycling out. Right now it's showing about 8 seconds, and we don't even see Webb in the camera frame. It looks like this is going to work out in Beets' favor by a long shot. Not only is he about 8 minutes ahead, or 1 lap ahead, I would say, on the fuel number, but he has gapped Jesse Webb by a considerable margin, at least at this point in the contest. And I'm not sure if that's by virtue of things that happened on track, or if perhaps there was a bit of a strategy play here when it comes down to how long it took for them to fill up that car with fuel.
Well, think about it, Eric. You're not really sacrificing any lap time to just save the car a little bit. And if you do so, you can get that extra lap. And then you're taking 8 minutes less fuel when you do so. And in fact, if he goes out there and runs an extra lap again, that's 16 minutes less fuel that Chris Beets has to put in the car. That's a winning strategy, it sounds like to me. And in fact, the pit lane times, a difference of 10 seconds. Well, actually, it comes up to about 9.3 regardless. That is huge, and that's exactly why we see an 8.7 second gap now. It fits right in to that 9.3 second turnaround for Chris Beets to take over the race lead. So it really comes down to pit strategy suddenly, and it really is just a matter of when you pit, I suppose. I did not think it was going to play that big of an importance. I thought it was just going to be a matter of go out there and try not to mess up, but quite clearly, Chris Beets has found something out.
He's the first man to play his hand, if you will, in the pit strategy, and the dividends definitely pay off for him quite efficiently here on the first cycle. But it makes sense that the pit stop would be about 10 seconds shorter when you consider that this racetrack is, let's see, I think outside of this racetrack, the largest racetrack we go to is Circuit Spa-Francorchamps, and it's probably you probably have to go around that racetrack about 4 times to equal the length of what you will see here at the Nurburgring. So it definitely makes sense as to why pit stop would be 9 or 10 seconds longer here at the, or shorter rather, here at the Nürburgring if you're able to push it that additional lap. And it does back up something we talk about every week, which is we often see guys try to push their fuel all the way to the end because we know pit stops can be slightly shorter just because you don't have to necessarily fill up quite as much.
Yeah, and as you can see, even on the racetrack, Sid's coming back out from the pit stops. Chris Beets is actually starting to build up a bit of an advantage. So perhaps we're seeing the opposite end of that spectrum where Webb came a lap earlier. He may be in a position now where he has to conserve a little bit in order to stretch his number the opposite direction the next time around, as we're now riding along with David Flanagan, who is inside the top 10, ninth running position. And I know we talked about the lone Ford on the field for what we believe is the first time this season. With that of Alexander Veldman, who's just up ahead. Veldman started back in 24th spot. He's already up to 8th, and just minding his manners, keeping that car on the pavement, not making any mistakes, and methodically working his way around all of his competitors that are having problems and falling out of this race. And that Ford is putting in a pretty solid run here tonight, and he may not be done climbing up the running order just yet, while the next closest pursuer is a little less than 10 seconds up ahead in the running order in the terms of Jimmy Allen. It just seems that the strategy in which Veldman has pulled here tonight is giving him an opportunity for an incredible debut with that Ford GT entry here tonight in the longest race of the season, as we are inching closer, about 7 minutes away from the halfway point in this race.
Yeah, at the end of the day on the iRacing.com service and in real racing in general, in sports car racing, if you will, there is no other discipline of racing or class of racing, if you will, that offers that diversity of options as whether you be an individual race car driver or a manufacturer wanting to design a car with certain unique characteristics. This is definitely the place to go. It could be incredibly affordable in the real life end. And on the iRacing side of things, it can be a lot of fun to test out all the different options that you have available to you. And because the costs are so much less than you might see in real life, you can play around with them when you go to different racetracks, and that's a lot of the fun of these GT3 racing on the iRacing.com service. And of course, you also see balance with performance, which is a way of equaling out some of the performance differences that you might see in real life, whether that be handling or horsepower, straight line speed. It gets the cars pretty close to being equal in terms of pace around the racetrack, and that's just a number of the factors that make GT3 racing so valuable, whether it be virtual or real life.
So we're starting to see some separation in the form in which I think many of us anticipated at some point in this race. We see a 10.5-second gap from Beets back to this driver and Jesse Webb. Behind him, you have to fall back 7 seconds to find Wade Hayes, who is currently rounding out our podium. And the impressive part about Hayes' performance here is that this is so far his best race of the 2021 season, to say the least. So we're going to go back here and take a look at Sarah Rabb, who was on the pit lane earlier on tonight. Rab, though, is running in about the 18th spot, albeit 2 laps down. And we're watching Sarah hit a couple of the curbing here, and we've seen that be a bit of a death sentence for some drivers in the past. And hopefully she does not run into any major misfortune here as we are watching her continue on here from on board of her race car. We talked about how much of a supporter that Sarah Rab is for this series, how much it means to her, and her results as of late have been impressive. Back-to-back top 10 finishes for Rab, looking for her 3rd in a row on this, the most difficult stop on the calendar. And thus far, despite being a few laps down, with over an hour left to go in this race, but that was a pretty hard hit there to the right-hand side of her car after bobbling there, overcorrecting a little bit and having that car shoot off to the arm cone. We talked about how unforgiving, Andrew, this track can be. There's really not a lot of runoff room at any point in the racetrack. It kind of reminds you of the totality of the Watkins Glen course in upstate New York a little bit, except this is pretty much 15 miles of a daunting guardrail on each side of the course, and it certainly caught Sarah Rab off guard. If that mistake would have been made at some of the other tracks they'll race on this season, she may have been able to get away with it, but that was a pretty significant right front impact.
You know what? I actually, I go back to a track that I mentioned while I was muted. Now, I want to say I've been away for almost 2 weeks. I come and pull double duty on production, and I'm just making all kinds of mistakes, but you guys are carrying the show. Point is, I was going back to calling Mount Panorama a pretty good comparison, maybe a more relatable comparison to challenges here at the Nurburgring. In fact, earlier I mentioned I was on a race pace setup to get an idea of the Nurburgring while making cameras here. I think that is an equally punishing racetrack. It's just that you happen to lap a little bit faster there. I think Bathurst is a great comparison, great course that you can relate to when it comes to the Nurburgring here. Watkins Glen, it's got some of the same characteristics. You got arm cone on either side for a lot of the course, but it's just so much more fast and flowing. It's a race car driver's dream as opposed to the Nürburgring, whereas everybody respects it, but you've got to respect it because you really can't push here or you're asking for an incident. And that's what we've seen from a lot of drivers. Unfortunately, it looked like we were coming into Dovetail, which I want to make sure I have the pronunciation right here. It would be Schwedenschwanz, I believe, thereabouts, towards the end of the lap, right after our, right before our second carousel on the lap, the Klein's carousel. We're now watching race leader Chris Beats, but I mentioned I was muted there, and Eric, you had asked me about the differences in these cars, and realistically, I don't think we're going to have that conversation a whole lot more this season. That's what I was trying to get at. I've already said it before, while I was unmuted, thankfully, but the Ferrari it's subject to the mid-engine formula, and Ferraris usually are. It's the reason Chevrolet went and moved the engine in the Corvette to the back end of the car, because you can attack corners a whole lot better. And this is where I brought in Bathurst, because if you take a mid-engine car to Bathurst, the McLaren for example, it is bad fast. It's also pretty hard to handle unless you can set the car up just right to preserve that speed and also attack each and every corner. The Ferrari, with its stability despite being mid-engined, is simply just the best all-around car for that. There again, I'm going to plug Race Pace one more time because Tyler Campbell does an amazing job over there. You can grab yourself a setup. This is a great lead, and we're going to have great segues for the next hour, Eric. We already have for the previous hour. It's a totally great way to get yourself some help, and if you're looking to pick up pace, and it seems like some of these guys might want to pick up 10 seconds of pace in an hour here at the Nürburgring, well, Tyler can help you out.
Yeah, and this is a racetrack where if you can get a stable setup, it's going to pay absolute dividends. It's going to let you focus on just hitting your braking markers at a racetrack where it can be incredibly difficult to really get the muscle memory down, just because, as we continue to say, it's a racetrack that takes 8 minutes to get around. It's unlike anything you'll see on the iRacing.com service. You'll see very few racetracks similar to this in real life. Bathurst, as you said, Andrew, is a really close comparison, but it's also a racetrack that's a lot shorter. And yeah, it's, just kind of hitting the point home again. You just have to go out there and show a lot of respect to this racetrack, because otherwise you are going to be immediately punished. Just very little runoff. It's very old school in that nature. It really hasn't conformed to a lot of modern runoff standards that you'll see at a lot of racetracks, and that can make it very rewarding, very exciting to be able to make even a single lap around this racetrack. So we continue to follow the lone Ford GT3 in the field, and that is Alexander Velleman making his debut in the season, and he is doing an excellent job starting to put the pressure on James Allen. That would move him up into the 7th position if he can execute that pass. And yeah, as you were talking, Andrew, we did officially pass halfway, so we are into the second half of the running, and things are really starting to get down to the wire. Might only be one more stop for these guys, or it might be one stop near the end.
Impressive to watch how Veldman is pulling up on Jimmy Allen so quickly. You have to wonder that if Veldman had a better run in qualifying and did not start all the way back in the 24th spot, how far up the running order would he be able to carry that Ford GT? Because he has been on a tear since we went green. And you see the gap now back to Veldman on the bottom right-hand portion of your screen. Love the new graphic that we have to offer here with the gap pretty much installed so we can all keep tabs on it instead of doing the math ourselves. You can see it's about 1.8 seconds from Allen as they come up the hill here. And again, if we look back a few laps ago, that was not the case at all. The margins have pretty much increased throughout the bulk of the field. You see how Beets has extended his lead over Webb. You see how Hayes has fallen further back from Webb in that third spot. Jones and Ruderbush continue to lock down the top five, but now we're looking at a fight for position here between Chris Brunnemer, who also did not have the best of qualifying efforts. In fact, started way back in the field. His charge up towards the front, though, is kind of stalled out in about this 12th spot as he's kind of trapped behind BC Voigt. But the good news is, even at this point in the race, as Voigt kind of washes up a little bit there, Brunnemer nearly got into the back bumper of Voigt's car in this race for 11th spot. Even though we're at this point in the race, we still have, beyond just the element of pit strategy, a lot of heavy racing going on for numerous positions, whether it be inside the top 10, just outside the top 10, and as we've seen on numerous occasions, just how quickly this track could jump up and bite you.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been saying it all night long. You cannot make a mistake here. You cannot get offline. If you do so, you're going to end up like John Whitendorf, hard into the Armberg Armco on lap 1. Just was a little bit offline, and the car just got a little bit away from him, braked on the grass a little bit, and he had troubles. And this is another corner coming up where you've got to be on it. Coming into the first carousel, you have got to be oh so careful, as we're going to see a pass here. Brunnemer making the pass into the Caracciola. I got to keep that in mind. Caracciola carousel. And it's going to, well, let him go right on by. BC Voigt going to have to fall into 12th position there. And you mentioned Brunnemer, very uncharacteristic that he qualified so far back. That's why qualifying up front is oh so important here. He's coming from a 22nd starting position. If he had started higher up, I guarantee you he would have been in 11th or higher a long time ago. Probably in the top 10 quite a long time ago.
And this might end up being the race for this driver who entered tonight third place in points. This might end up being the race where he's going to end up having to take a drop. He's had an incredibly strong season so far. The best of the returning drivers. I believe he finished either second or third in the championship. Our champion last year, of course, was Garrett De Alessandro. Couldn't return this season. Hope to see him back in the future. But yet, just a pretty consistent and solid recovery drive so far for Brunnemer. I believe he gritted up as the first driver not to take a qualifying lap. And as you said, Andrew, it just shows what can happen at a racetrack like this. It can be incredibly difficult to pull off overtakes, and it's a place where the running can get incredibly spread out just because of how difficult it is to get around here, and not a lot of straightaways here, at least not a lot of straightaways that let you stay in a consistent slipstream.
And Trey, even as some of these battles for position do in fact get spread out, you never want to be lulled into a false sense of security or maybe become too comfortable with this racing venue, because it could plague a quick mistake on even the best and most fierce competitors. With that, we are in the second half of this race for the Pacific Challenge GT3 Series here in Round 7 at the historic Nurburgring. We're going to step aside, give us an opportunity to catch our breath. We can expect pit stops in the next 15 minutes or so. We'll be back with the coverage of that and more, all the way to the checkered flag right here on Pit Stop TV.
Sound Art is a product that is a speaker and it's art. We combine it together and we call it Sound Art. What makes it so unique that any picture can be your speaker? Sound Art gives you the high quality sound without the ugly speaker. This isn't a picture with a speaker, the picture is the speaker. Just imagine your wedding picture uploaded onto a canvas and now it's speaking 10,000 tunes. I mean, it's a very cool concept. What we like so much about it that you can take anything that means something very special to you, upload it on the canvas, have it hanging up in your room, your balcony, wherever you want to put it, and now it's a speaker. I mean, how cool is that? It's something that we have that and no one has. No one has this product. It's just a great gift to give anybody. It's just a neat concept. Around here we say, art never sounded so good.
Welcome back to round number 7 of the Pacific Challenge GT3 Series here at the Nurburgring, the historic 15-plus mile course located in Nuremberg, Germany, a true staple to the footprint of German motorsports and road course racing as a whole, playing host to one of the most competitive road racing series on the sim. I'm Eric Brennan. Pleasure to be with you on the call. It's been an amazing season for the Pacific Challenge GT3 Series, but I am not alone for an event of this capacity. We had to pull out a number of heavy hitters, and we would have had more here if we could have. Andrew Cardinale IV joining me on the call of this race, also handling our production duties, and Trace Shuttlesworth providing awesome insight as well to what has been a very interesting race where strategy is starting to come to the forefront. We also want to shout out Corey Rexford, who always does a spectacular job on our social media platforms, and that is where you can catch the end of these races on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube, as we have already started to see our second wave of pit stops, and for some competitors, it may be coming in the form of a little bit too early, as Wade Hayes has already made his stop. Here's Chris Brunnemer, though. We've been documenting his charge up through the pack after a subpar qualifying effort. The driver who was third in the championship standings up to about the 11th spot. However, he was battling for position, still running at about that 11th position here now by himself after getting clear into that 11th spot. One spot shy of a top 10, but a huge mistake and a flush impact there with the left side of his race car to put a little bit more salt on the wound to the fact that it's been a tough road to hoe throughout the duration of this event. But fortunately, he keeps it rolling. No assistance of a tow back to the pit area, but our eyes are pointed on some of the front runners as well, as it seems as though that pit stop number 2 is coming. And being that Wade Hayes had to make his stop with about 55 minutes to go, Mick Blue, one of the amateur drivers in the field, on the pit lane with 51 minutes to go. Andrew, I'm afraid that these guys are going to be on a 3-stop strategy.
Yeah, there are some that are on that 3-stop strategy I tried to mention there towards the top of the show. It's really close to whether or not you can make it. And at this point, these guys are running their Crew Chief app and other apps like it. They're trying to figure out exactly how far they can go. They want to make sure they don't run out of fuel, because it's much more painful, much more punishing to run out of fuel here than to take the extra pit stop. You may as well just take the extra stop, take the extra time, and deal with it than to run out of fuel somewhere like here where we are in the Carrocciola carousel as well. I think that was Sven Hartman parked on the outside of the corner letting our race leader go by. You know what? That's a proper move, considering there are no other opportunities to really do that. That actually kind of works right there in the first carousel. So yeah, these guys have got to make sure they play it right. You cannot risk running out of fuel here. Somewhere like Watkins Glen, even like you mentioned earlier on, you might be able to coast around, sacrifice something. You might even just run out in the final couple of corners like we've seen in so many NASCAR races. But here, even if you run out in the final couple of corners before you get onto the Dottinger Hove, boy, are you in trouble. Even at Bathurst, you can coast down the Conrad Straight, and as long as you get through the chase with relative speed, you're going to be okay. Here at the Nürburgring, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing, if you have to ever go for a tow here in the iRacing.com service, the length of the tow is most of the time based off of, in some cases it's based off of how far you are from your pit box, but sometimes it's just based off of the size of a racetrack. So say here at the Nürburgring, a tow, I'm not sure of the exact tow time, but it could definitely be several more minutes than you'll see at, say, any of the other stops we go to here on the tour. I believe we were seeing probably about 8 to 10 minute tow times, about the length to get around a racetrack. That seems to be about what the pattern is at some racetracks. About as long as it takes to get around a racetrack is about as long as it takes for the virtual tow trucks to get you back onto the paddock and take care of whatever repairs or fueling or adjustments that your car may need.
Yeah, and although we don't want to try to, beat a dead horse per se, we did see, though, some of the downsides of trying to make it back yourself, like with what happened to Brady Lubenow at the beginning of this race, as we are on board with Jimmy Allen, who's trying to keep pace with Alexander Veltman, who got around him about one lap earlier. But Lubenow had a pretty significant impact off while running in second spot and elected to stay on the racetrack. And not only did he drive his car, continue to race his car for about one lap or so, but he ended up losing control of that car 3 more times throughout the event before finally electing to get a tow to the pits. And then, to add insult to injury, ended up having some connectivity issues, which put him out of it for the foreseeable future, that is. So there could be some negative effects to trying to avoid the option or potential of getting a tow back and trying to do it yourself, where you could just end up kind of not only multiplying your problems, but you could end up sweeping up somebody else as well, which is something that these drivers elect to try to keep in mind. So risk versus reward being weighed there in 2 different facets, as it looked as though Veltman was about to have a big moment there. That might have just been a little bit of neck coder lacking on his end, but from the eyes of Jimmy Allen, if he saw what we saw, I bet he had an oh moment, as he is doing everything he can to close up that gap in what is a race for 6th.
Through the dovetail portion of the racetrack and now into that second almost the second chicane, the second carousel. That was close. You know what? Jimmy Allen was right on that that cushion I mentioned you could jump earlier, almost like a dirt track. You've got to be in the proper line. If you go just beyond it, just to the right of the end of that little bit of banking, boy, you're going to have trouble. And if your car isn't handling right, I think it'd be better to take the slower route and just go around the outside, take the flat racetrack. While we're talking about this is killer to the race, guys. Chris Beets is underfueled, and it's an 8-minute penalty, kind of. You have to pay 8 minutes sooner if you do. This is big for Chris Beets. This completely changes the dynamic of this race. He's underfueled a bit too much, and as such, he's got to pit 8 minutes sooner. This changes legitimately everything. He cannot make it to the end if we're correct. James Hansen said you can maybe do it on 6, and it would be 6 laps from here, but you're really going to have to stretch if you're Chris Beets right here.
And the one thing to consider is that on the first wave of stops, Jesse Webb came in 1 lap sooner than Chris Beets. As you mentioned, Andrew, Beets ended up taking the short fill there, and that's what kind of threw us for a loop as far as the pit stops for the time being. But you're right, though. I don't know if he's going to be able to make it to the end. He's rejoining the race here with 46 minutes to go, and as Trey Shuttlesworth has pointed out multiple times, a lot of it is going to depend on when you get to the white flag and how much time is going to be left, as we see that we also do have a couple of other cars on the pit lane, including that of Jimmy Allen, who's involved in that race for position. We also saw Trevor Anderson on the pit lane getting service, 7th in championship points, looking for his 4th top 10 of the season if he can remain up there in the top 10 of the running order. But as of right now, Andrew, it looks as though this is where that second wave is in full effect, and the timing is going to be, I think, all about that white flag. If we have to go one additional lap, we may see a lot of these front runners run out of fuel, and we might get an upset before all is said and done. But right now, Jesse Webb appears to have, for now, perfected this pit strategy.
And we were watching Trevor Anderson's pit stop right there. He took tires. That's another thing to mention. This might be the first time we've seen any of these guys running for the win take tires this evening. We saw Chris Beets do it as well. This is important that they're actually taking tires. You can run 2 hours on these GT tires, but boy, they get pretty hot. They get pretty worn out by the end of it, especially a place like this. You're taking 100 some odd corners per lap, as we see race leader Jesse Webb into Arenberg. This is important that we're seeing tire changes, and we didn't see Jimmy Allen do it. He may have done it on his first stop, and not this one, to take that time penalty kind of in his pit stop out of it the second time around. I wonder what Jesse Webb is going to do this time by, and if that may have played into the big gap that we saw growing for the race lead, because Webb was getting gap Trey Shuttlesworth, so I wonder if the tires are playing into this.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up and discuss a little bit. And looking at timing and scoring, it seems like it might be a little bit difficult to necessarily say. It might be something where individual drivers are experiencing a little bit of tire fall off, which might cause them to want to come down and get some fresh tires. We see the likes of, say, Jesse Webb and Curtis Jones. These are drivers that last lap were about 4 seconds off of their best times here at the racetrack. But then third place, Mikael Ruderbusch, he's only about a second off of his best time, which is a 7:59.0. And then actually, Corey Peters, just 1 lap ago, set his best lap on the racetrack, but he doesn't have quite the raw pace that the guys up front do. So there definitely could be some tire fall off, and it's up to you as a driver to say, do I want to get myself a little bit more guaranteed grip on the racetrack? And that could be something that, while it's going to cost you a little bit of time on the pit road, it could pay off massively if you have a lot more confidence in your cornering.
So we are patiently awaiting Jesse Webb's arrival to the pit lane for service. So keep in mind that some of the metrics that you're seeing on the timing and scoring ticker on the left-hand side of your screen are the result of the fact that Webb has not come down to the pit lane, no. But before he does so, let's take this opportunity to thank a couple of partners who are on board and the reason behind our broadcast of tonight's Pacific Challenge GT3 Series event at the Nurburgring. Our broadcast tonight is brought to you by our friends at Tucson Sound Art. Remember, your picture, your music. And when you head on over to TucsonSoundArt.com, be sure to use the promo code PitStopTV at checkout for 10% off your order. We also want to thank Race Pace, as our broadcast is brought to you by Race Pace as well, so you can pick up the pace with Race Pace. As Andrew and Trey have both alluded to, Race Pace is a community-driven setup shop and driver development program all in one, and it is an opportunity for you to ensure that you are up to speed with professional help. Again, pick up the pace with Race Pace. We're also brought to you by Permanent Makeup in Maine, because you deserve the best care that money can buy. For more information on available products and services, visit permanentmakeupinmaine.com. And finally, our broadcast tonight is also brought to you by Whiplash Media, the official parent company and graphic and camera provider of Pit Stop TV. It is because of them that we are able to have such beautiful sights of this massive, massive layout, as Alexander Veldman is all over the backside of Flanagan, and Flanagan is going to step aside. He's going to let Veldman by there after what looked to be a little bit of a nudge to try to get past. With 42 minutes to go in this race, and Webb should be coming up on the pit lane momentarily, but we still got fights that are hot and heavy throughout the top 10.
Yeah, that was a pretty easy pass right there for Veldman because, well, David saw the Ford GT growing larger in his mirrors and rolled over, let him have it, and that's a very smart move. You don't really want to have to race somebody. Something you mentioned at the top of the show, Eric Brennan, was you have to race the racetrack. You don't want to have to race another driver. Very, very important, a key thing about the Nürburgring. And when you show up here in April, if you're an iRacing driver looking to do so as a team, show up in April for the iRacing 24 hours of the Nürburgring. That's something to keep in mind. You never want to race another car out there unless you really have to. If it comes down to the win, sure, maybe. But otherwise, you are racing the racetrack. You've got to master all 15 miles of this place, 24 some odd kilometers. It's insane how long this place is, and it doesn't really feel like it, though. I will say, it's gone by a lot quicker than I thought it would. And when you go to these onboards, sometimes you just get into a trance following them, and as a driver you get into a trance and you just kind of follow along, follow the different, I guess, feelings of the road. And it's a lot like driving down a country road that you might not have been down before. You just kind of follow the road, get into a trance, and have a nice little drive. That's why some people take those nice little drives on the country roads. So it's this big challenging monster, but at the same time, if you have it under control, if the car is handling nicely, you're able to just sit back and relax.
Yeah, I definitely think what we're seeing here is a racetrack that's just absolutely awesome for these GT3 cars. Oftentimes we don't really get to see these cars necessarily have the look and feel as if they're on the limit, but this is a racetrack where you can see that the cars are definitely handling the corners with a lot of ease, and if you're a race car driver, you can definitely push the limit here in these GT3 cars. So yeah, definitely a lot of fun, and you know, it was a racetrack that in its early days definitely got a lot of famous use as an open wheel racetrack, but I think it's definitely transferred well into what is a, if you will, a bastion for production cars, if you want to take tourist laps around the racetrack, or in this case, the top tier of racing that you'll normally see at the racetrack are GT3 cars. And it's just absolutely an awesome combination of car and track, unlike anything you'll see anywhere in the world, really, in the modern age.
Yeah, certainly you'd be hard-pressed to try to find anything that resonates. And how about this? Webb is going to stay out another lap. So That's going to put him, remember, he pitted, according to my notes, and they're not always the best, he pitted right about the 1 hour and 20 minutes ago mark. So we've eclipsed that 40-minute delta time that we would try to do the math on here from the last time he was on the pit lane. He's starting another lap. You got to take off about another 7 minutes or so. We're talking about maybe he's going to be down here with 32 minutes to go, according to my notes and information here. So that's surprising that it looks as though Webb is going to forego the pit lane here once again, as we're on board with him here.
Well, we're going on board very specifically. Listen to the motor. I'll shut up for a second. Listen to the motor. He's going to lift. He lifted there. Coasting, coasting, coasting. Using the track to slow down. Coasting, coasting, coasting. Gets into the power a little bit. Coasting, coasting. He is saving a ton. Jesse Webb knows that he has to have the extra fuel in case this race runs a lap long. He knows how much he needs to save, and he's doing so right now. Jesse Webb, very aware of the fact that this race could get extended, like Trey Shuttlesworth brought up a while ago. He knows he's got to run this extra lap past the 40-minute mark. Otherwise, he might have to save later on, and that's not a guarantee. You don't want to have to put yourself in that box. It's better to run long here and just run flat out to the end than have to suddenly save in fuel map 12 and try and get around this place at a snail's crawl. Well, snail's pace. One of the two. You get it.
Yeah, and coming into tonight, Andrew, it's a good point you brought up about just the fact that we are in a race that is having a unique case of fuel strategy, unlike anything we've seen so far this season. I think back to Spa, where guys, I believe Eric and I were on the call. That was definitely a fun one. We were thinking we might have to potentially flirt with the idea of 2 pit stops, but those guys were able to manage with 1. But just because of the length of this racetrack and the length of this race, we've been presented with a unique challenge, not just in terms of the on-track racing product, but the strategy that these guys are having to utilize. And honestly, incredible to see Jesse Webb pulling off something that I don't think we were expecting to see coming into tonight. Considering, like,
he's lifting here again. He's coasting this entire time. I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is into Arnberg. He coasted that entire way into the corner. He is saving so much fuel just lifting and coasting. I wouldn't be surprised if he's putting the clutch in as well.
And I think that just continues to back up your point that and this was something you said well earlier, but there's a lot of places on this racetrack where if need be, you can definitely go out there and save.
Coasting again.
And yeah, case in point yet again. So definitely an excellent job by a driver who is, statistically looking at his I rating, one of the best drivers to enter the series, even if he is a rookie here this season.
Even though that engine may be silent at times, I bet that his heart is pounding out of his chest because he has just got to be on the edge as far as the fuel number. And you bring up a great point, Andrew.
Look at the RPMs. He's got the clutch in.
Yeah, this is definitely the time to do this because he does not want to be in this position on the back half of this race, depending on what time they get to the white flag. And look at the timing and scoring pylon. I believe that Curtis Jones may be on this strategy as well, as he too is evidently not pitted. We do know that Wade Hayes was one of the first cars to come down. He should cycle out to the lead when all is said and done, but we know he'll have to stop again. He pitted with 55 minutes to go. There's no way he's going to make it to the end.
This is also Flanagan's 6th lap. Here again, coasting. He's into first. He has the clutch in. He's coasting the car into the corner. You can watch that gear. It's a little hard to see, but you can watch that gear change. Watch the RPMs as well sometimes. It drops down to about 2,400. He doesn't put the clutch in here, but he's putting the... This is something I rarely ever see in sports cars, especially, well, even on iRacing. He's putting the clutch in and saving. I've done this a few times. I didn't think other people actually did this in times in GT cars. This is incredible. And he's using his gap. It was 10 seconds not so long ago. Back to Curtis Jones. Jesse Webb, very aware of the gap that he has to work with and very aware of the fact that likely he can go and put all that time back on Curtis Jones. He knows that he's got pace, and he knows that honestly, as well, if he slows down a bit, he can bring his average lap time up and possibly keep this race from going that extra lap.
Yeah, not just that. The raw pace that he has might be able to entrap someone like Curtis Jones to potentially not have the fuel to make it to the end. So that's just one of the benefits that come in addition to having incredible strong pace at a racetrack. And Webb has unloaded at the racetrack very well so far, and he's executed so far 3/4 of the way
Clutch in
through.
again. You saw it drop to 2,400 for a moment. That's incredible.
Just an absolutely awesome job around this 15-mile racetrack. And just because the motions that you have to make in terms of steering and braking are so coordinated, that really changes up what you had to do going into the braking zone. So it's definitely impressive that he's able to engage the clutch and maneuver the corner differently, because it is an entirely different beast when you're having to do the clutching and coasting on the entry of a corner.
Yeah, and Trey, that's an excellent point, because think about it. What have we been talking about all night? Your biggest competition tonight is this racetrack. You have 15-plus miles of asphalt to try to figure out how to get around this place on corners that are vastly different on every sector of the racetrack, literally running through different towns in order to make your way up through this course. And now Jesse Webb finds himself doing something that I'm sure that he may have practiced a little bit for, but it may be at a little bit of a different environment. He's got his eyes on the ticker. He wants to know what the margin is back to his competition. He knows the number he has to hit. He's probably got another eye on the fuel indicator to see just how close he may be. I mean, this is an absolutely incredible performance, even if it doesn't pan out the way in which he's hoping for, which, you know, knowing the talent that he's proven so far this season, I'm optimistic that he may be able to pull this off. But considering all the elements that already go into running a solid race here at the Nurburgring, now adding the elements, as Andrews pointed out, with him pushing the clutch to save fuel, this is a masterful job and driving effort by Jesse Webb. And even though it's not done yet, the fact he's been able to keep it going at this rate, it's got to be something for us to marvel.
Got the clutch in again. This is... I don't care about the result, what the standings say, anything like that. Clutch in again. You can hear the motor just die. And it's silent. The RPMs drop way down. He brings the... pulls the clutch back out. And now he'll go into the second carousel here. This is incredible. Just mad respect. It doesn't matter to me the fact that he's P1, but the fact that he is able to think about this stuff. This is what you want out of a race car driver. If you're engineering for your sim racing team or even real team, this is what you want out of a driver. Somebody who can think about this stuff and be able to multitask like this. And to Trey's point, be able to keep track of putting the clutch in and coming back off the clutch, engaging and disengaging the clutch at the right times so as to not tweak the back end of the car, so as to not torque the rear axle the wrong way, because you absolutely can. You can catch it at the wrong RPM and really send yourself into a spin sometimes if you aren't careful. Clutch in again. See it drop to 2,000 RPMs, well, 2,400 thereabouts. Still coasting, still coasting. He's still coasting. Gets back in a little bit for the uphill. Coasting again. Clutch back in. This is something you don't usually see in a sports car. And you know what? You could hear on the stream, he brought the clutch back out at the wrong point in time and kind of threw himself a little bit. Now he's going to come into the pit lane, and he's bought himself a ton of insurance, and he's coming in on the far side of 32 minutes. We may not have that extra lap. We may. We'll see.
And even if we have that extra lap, I think he's bought himself a comfortable amount of time out on the racetrack. We were seeing guys on 5 laps go out there for what would have been about, I want to say about 40 minutes. So I think he does that comfortably, even if, say, you get the white flag with 1 or 2 minutes to go and we actually go 36, 37 minutes longer. 36, 37 minutes in total, 6 or 7 minutes longer than intended. So definitely an excellent job by Jesse Webb. We'll just have to see how the cards end up being played at the end of the race. But yeah, all around impressive job. We've talked about it so much, and it's with good reason. It's just been an absolutely masterful drive so far.
So now we're on board with Chris Beets, who, let's reset the stage here as we're about to enter the final quarter of this 2-hour event here at the Nurburgring of the Pacific Challenge GT3 Series, round number 7 of their season. 4 races left to go, including tonight's endurance event, as Webb is going to come off the pit lane here, nearly sandwiched between that of his closest pursuer in the championship and Chris Beets, who's got a good run off the corner. These two may want to be careful here, although for Beets, this is an opportunity. He can get up and somewhat disrupt the rhythm of a driver who he knows may be in a better position fuel-wise, and he's looking to the inside. Now he's going to be on the outside of the right-handed corner. Beets applying the pressure. He's got a good run here, and he's alongside for what's going to be a battle for third.
And he's going to make this pass in this hairpin. You can't really run side by side in this cut-through between turns 4 and 5 of the normal course. The sprint course takes you through that little hairpin. And again, you just cannot run side by side there. Jesse Webb, very heads-up move to give that spot up. And now these two are heads-up racing. That said, Jesse Webb needn't be worried because Chris Beets will have to pit again unless he can stretch fuel out. So if he does want to stretch fuel out, he'll have to do what Jesse Webb was just doing, putting the clutch in and coasting down a good solid portion of the Dottinger Hove and other straightaways around this 15-mile course. I'm just not so sure that Chris Beets has anything for Jesse Webb on the strategy game. You know how earlier we saw that he ran that extra lap, Chris Beets did? I'm not so sure about it this time around. It seems like he's been pushing. It seems like he's been putting himself in this position. And you know what? At that point in time, we thought by the fact that he ran 8 minutes longer in that first stint, we thought maybe he had the best chance to win. Suddenly, not so much, because I really do think Jesse Webb's in the best position to win. But I've been surprised before, and Chris Beets still can surprise me. It really comes down to whether or not we get that extra lap, Trey Shuttlesworth. That's what will determine this race.
Yeah, and I think we're going to be incredibly close on that. It's 28 minutes now. The leaders probably cross the start-finish line around 30 or 31 minutes, and with it taking about 8 minutes to get around here, we're going to be right on the cusp of whether or not we get that additional lap. So we're going to have a lot of suspense going to the end of this race. And not just that, but we know that the likes of, say, Curtis Jones, who is the race leader right now, 50 seconds ahead of Wade Hayes in second, he's probably going to have to come down one more time. He's on his 6th lap right now, so he's also a driver who's stretching the field right now. It'll be interesting to see where he comes out, because when he comes back out onto the racetrack, he's probably going to be able to push as much as he desires, as long as he has the pace to go out there and do it. So that could also throw a wrench into things. A lot still to play for over the last 27.5 minutes, and then some potentially.
So what we know of is we believe that Curtis Jones, who is the race leader right now, also a driver who we should not overlook by any stretch of the imagination. Coming into tonight's race, Jones, who has had a pretty considerable season for the most part, 10th in the championship standings, despite the fact he did not race the last time out at Laguna Seca, was able to rack up some solid finishes in the early portion of the year, including a 5th place finish at Donington Park. That's his only top 5, and then he had 3 straight top 10 finishes. A little bit of bad luck at Imola before he took the week off at Laguna Seca. Now back in action here, but we believe that he may have to pit again, although it looks as though, according to the deficit back to Wade Hayes, he is starting to save fuel himself as that margin has started to shrink significantly. Now let's talk about Wade Hayes. We know that he last came onto the pit lane with 55 minutes to go, so we're going to start to get into his pit window, we believe, before he makes it to the end. Even though Jesse Webb has proven you could extend well beyond that 40-minute mark or so, I don't know that the rest of the field is doing what Jesse Webb did in order to make that possible, nor did they have the buffer to work with at the head of the pack. But we do want to tip our caps to Wade Hayes for sure, because this has been his most impressive run of the season at this point. 15th in the standings. He also did not make the trek out to Imola, and thus far in 2021, he has one top 10 finish, and that came at Spa. He's yet to get on the podium. This has by far been a podium performance. It's been a great night. As a matter of fact, carrying the banner for the BMWs in the field this evening, after we've seen a couple of other BMWs in the field have problems. Wade Hayes has steadily marched his way from his 7th starting position on the grid, has been in fierce battles all night long, currently running 2nd, but as we mentioned, with so much still to unfold, we're not quite sure where he is going to land once all is said and done. And Chris Beets is starting to eat up the gap from 3rd. You see the gap now about 3 seconds. As a matter of fact, Beets is starting to enter the camera frame here in this race for 2nd spot, but he's going to have to hope that he could somehow, perhaps by the luck of timing or perhaps by the luck of fuel saving as Jesse Webb overcooks the corner, that Beets will be able to close up and remain on track and not have to pit late in this race. Not sure, though, Andrew, he's going to be that lucky.
Oh no! Jesse Webb in the first carousel goes completely off. He's having some problems here. I believe he took tires under this stop. I could be wrong on that. What I will point out is I think he may have tried to underfuel. It's hard for me to say based on the pit time. But regardless, I think he may be on cold tires here. He's having some troubles. He overcooked it into Klostertal, and he definitely overcooked it into the Caracciolo carousel. Jesse Webb having some problems, which is going to possibly hand this to the way of Chris Beets. It's still hard to say. we'll have to wait and see how this race pans out. It's really hard for us to say, actually, considering we know Chris Beats has run 6 laps before, but I don't know how easily he can do it again. He's got a race for this one. I don't know if he'll be able to save the same fuel. My bad. So Chris Beats pit 2 laps ago. No, sorry. I looked at a message here from Corey. I'm going to call Corey out. Yeah, Webb pitted a couple of laps prior. No, Webb pitted this past lap prior, and Beats is 2 laps into his run. This will be his 3rd lap, actually. So I still think Chris Beats is going to have to pit again. I do like, though, that you guys brought up Curtis Jones. He's now on his 7th lap, and that's a bit unheard of. He must be in a higher fuel map just trying to cut out a pit stop, but I'm not so sure you're going to be able to do it. And you do mention, Eric, that we have 2nd and 3rd in the same frame. 4th is kind of back there, but if Jesse Webb keeps having problems on those cold tires, well, he's going to be careful.
Yeah, and the important thing, I think, with it being only 3 rounds of the championship after tonight, Jesse Webb might want to take that short-term loss if it means falling back a couple positions, as opposed to damaging the car and dropping what will be probably, looking at timing and scoring, he could definitely lose, say, 10 spots as to where he is right now. Last car in the lead lap right now is John McClintock, and then there are a couple drivers within 1 or 2 laps of the race leaders right now. And with how tight the championship battle is between him and Beats, say he can't necessarily get the raw pace to go out there and get the job done, even with Chris Beats's our prediction of Chris Beats having to come down pit road one more time. It's just something where, sure, maybe you want to compromise a little bit of your pace if he is on fresh tires, if it means staying in the championship hunt.
So the sidebar to this conversation was that coming into tonight's race, as Curtis Jones is in fact on the pit lane, this will in fact be his final pit stop of the race, and this should relinquish the lead over to potentially Wade Hayes, who we are following here to this sector of the racetrack, considering the fact that Hayes is going to stay out on the main straightaway. So Hayes is going to inherit the lead. Beats is behind him now in the draft. We'll call it about maybe 20 car lengths back, as Jones is actually going to enter here into turn number 1. In fact, Jones may be able to cycle through to the lead here. Hayes is right there. That may be the winning move of the race, as a matter of fact. If Jones could stay up at the front of the pack, and if he did not get too short on the number as far as fuel fill, I did not expect Jones to come out in front of all these cars. That is an incredible job on the strategy call by him. And who would have thought that an hour and 40 minutes into this race at the Nurburgring, the top 3 are all lined up together, with Jesse Webb potentially the driver who could be the most aggressive towards the end, even though he was struggling a little bit the lap off the pit lane. We're in for a thriller here.
This race is by no means over. I think Wade Hayes, he still has to pit. Chris Beats, maybe. In fact, Wade Hayes definitely has to. This is his 6th lap of this run. He will have to pit this time by or the next time if he's saved enough fuel. I'm beyond shocked by Curtis Jones being able to come out ahead of Chris Beats and Jesse Webb. That is incredible, and everybody at PSM needs to be happy with that big move right there, because Curtis Jones suddenly might be able to hang on to this lead and might possibly be able to win this race. It's hard to say. There's still a long ways to go here, but oh my, everything is changing here in just over 20 minutes. In fact, we're coming up to 20 minutes in 45 seconds. So this is incredible stuff. I'm so happy that the dynamic of this race is still changing this far in.
Absolutely incredible to see this late into the going, and Eric was definitely hinting at the idea of this potentially being the race where we could see someone upset the streak of Chris Beats, Jesse Webb, and you know, those two over and over, which has been the case in this season. It's been absolutely compelling to see those two go at it, but you definitely like to see an underdog story play out, and we're definitely seeing the potential for that to happen tonight. Curtis Jones enters the points picture tonight, 9th place in points. So in theory, you would think there's a lot of guys that have stronger pace than him, but he's shown to be incredibly consistent. He qualified fairly well. He has a pretty consistent looking at his lap times, he's been fairly consistent for most of the running, and it's paid off. Execution of strategy. And yeah, just all around excellent job from someone that I would consider a dark horse coming into tonight.
I agree, Trey, and that's not to take anything away from a driver who was 10th in the points coming into tonight's contest. Obviously shown pace and speed throughout the season, but when you have drivers with the likes of Chris Beets, Jesse Webb, who pretty much been hogging up all the victories to themselves, you know, it's not a surprise for us to pencil them in as favorites, but I'm telling you, things are really starting to tighten up here. Hayes is all over the back of Jones. Not sure if Jones is in a conservative effort right now, but Chris Beets is charging, and I am not quite sure if he is going to have what it takes. Again, Beets last pitted, according to my note here, back with about 47 minutes to go because of the fact, as Andrew mentioned, he didn't get it fully fueled the first time. That cost him to come in a lot sooner than he did on the first stop, so I don't know if he can make it 47, and that's not just 47 minutes to the checkered flag. That's 47 minutes to when we expect the clock to run out, plus however long it takes to complete that final lap. So he's got to go longer than just the 18 minutes and 40 seconds you see on the top left-hand side of your screen to get this job done. But top three, nose to tail, under a blanket in a 2-hour event here at the most tough track on the sim, and we've got a barn burner on our hands.
We'll head into the town of Adenauer, and you saw Curtis Jones very crossed up through the Adenauer forest. Thankfully, he kept the car underneath him, but it was very, very close, and that's what you mentioned there, Eric, of very almost contact between the top two. Wade Hayes got right up to the back of him. I still think Wade Hayes is just interjected in the middle of this and is going to end up being the number 9's cushion here. I think Curtis Jones is going to be able to, because, I mean, if you're Wade Hayes, there's no sense in trying to pass. You may as well sit here in second place. It may slow him down, but why risk battling here with somebody you're not going to be battling for a position at the end of the race? If you're thinking about the big picture here and you're Wade Hayes, you've got to sit back here and just follow the tire tracks of the 9 car. You're not able to make it to the end of the race, but I mean, he's getting so impatient back there.
Yeah, the position he's at is quite risky, just because if there is a mistake out of the 9 of Curtis Jones, he's not going to have the maximum amount of time to be able to react to what's going to, in theory, happen in front of him. So, no, I definitely would agree with you, Andrew. It might not be in the best interest to be pushing quite as hard. Now, say if Jones lets you by all means, take advantage of that pace, because it seems like he does have pretty consistent pace right now in the 83. But no, I think just looking at timing and scoring, he has to think about just executing right now, keeping calm. He'll probably come out around the 5th, 6th, 7th positions, and he'll be able to race for a top 5. And regardless, he's in a position to pick up a massive amount of points and continue his mid-season rise through the ranks.
And even after things tightened up there amongst the top three. And the reason why a lot of us are saying that there's no way that Hayes is going to make it, we already highlighted the fact that we're questionable on the status of Chris Beets and whether he can get to the end. We said Beets pitted with 47 minutes to go. Hayes was the first car in the pit lane with 55 minutes to go. So he's coming up on that 40-minute window that we're kind of accustomed to seeing these drivers have. And keep in mind, the average lap time here tonight has been, you know, in or around 7 minutes and 52 seconds, 7 minutes 53 seconds. So every lap that you forego the pit entry is another 7.5 plus minutes that you're counting on having saved up in the fuel cell. I don't think that's going to be a viable option for Hayes if he stays on track one more lap, but Jesse Webb's kind of proved all of us wrong at some point here tonight. But Andrew, I'm shocked that Webb has fallen back 7 seconds. He may be aware that Jones has come in for what should be his last bit of service on the track, maybe trying to bank on the fact that Jones short-filled too much, or is he struggling with the handle of that race car since he made those stops?
Well, I'll correct something I mentioned, and Jesse Webb did not take tires this last time through. Chris Beets did, and that's very important. I mentioned this is the first time all season we're talking about the possibility of tires playing into this race. Chris Beets on fresh tires, Jesse Webb not. So it comes down to whether or not Chris Beets can make it to the end of this race, and then whether or not he can pass Curtis Jones, because now as we head into the second carousel, it's all very close. And it's really hard to say exactly what we see out of this top 4 now. We're within 6 seconds for all of them, and, well, 7 seconds actually with Jesse Webb a little further back. And the top 3 are all within about 1 second. So this is incredible stuff, and here we'll see they go down the Dottinger Hove, and this is where everything is going to change up a little bit, I would expect. You see the 21-kilometer marker. Oh boy, this could be where things get interesting this lap.
Yeah, we see that Chris Beets is right on the rear of Wade Hayes, and we're expecting Hayes to come down into the pit lane probably this time. And, well, we're going to see side-by-side, potentially 3 wide as we head under the bridge. Jones is going to remain in the top spot for the time being. Now electing to go to his right side, it's going to be Wade Hayes. Nowhere for Beats to go for the time being. Ooh, we head into the braking zone. Still side-by-side. Incredible racetrack between these two. And, of course, Wade Hayes in the position probably, if he needs to come down this time, to just dip from the right side lane and go down onto the pit road. We will see him do that. So excellent racecraft. And it's unfortunate for him that he's going to be a pit stop shy of these guys, but he's still in a position to go out there and pick up a pretty solid points day. And now we're going to be side-by-side heading into turn 1 for the race lead. It's going to be Chris Beats, if he can pull it off, yet again going to the race lead. No crossover from Curtis Jones this time by.
Yeah, Jones did not have the opportunity to get back to the power and get back by. So Chris Beats, the points leader and pole sitter for this race, up to position number 1. The question now becomes, can Curtis Jones hang with him? And is there enough fuel inside that car to get him to the finish? Wade Hayes certainly made sure that he let these drivers know that he was pitting while running up front with the top drivers in this field. But as he has come down for service, Trey Shuttlesworth pretty much maybe hit the nail on the head. Believe he's going to come out still with a top 5 position after what's pretty much just going to be potentially about a quarter fill to get him out there towards the end of this race. He's still running in 4th spot. But the question becomes now, will Hayes make it to the end? And one other item of contention, while this battle for the lead started to tighten up, Jesse Webb has taken about a second and a half off the leaders. We got about 13 minutes left to go. That should get us back to the line with maybe 2 laps to go if they're lucky. It's going to be close.
Well, it certainly helps if you're Jesse Webb to have Wade Hayes spoil the party and take it side by side there with Curtis Jones. I'm still a little bit shocked by that move. I mean, one misstep from Curtis Jones and all 3 of the races could have been over. And again, as a driver, you're not racing there. I don't know if I like that move, but hey, it worked out thankfully, and it might have saved Wade Hayes a little bit of time. It's hard to say. Jesse Webb. Whew. That has been one of the trouble spots, one of the underrated trouble spots all race long. That little kind of junction of S's there before you head through the Quiddelbacher Hove, and I think that would be Hohenheiken. I'm hoping that's somewhat close there to the pronunciation. That has been one of the trouble spots that it doesn't hurt the car necessarily because it doesn't really put you in the wall that quickly as we come over Flugenplatz, but it certainly hurts the time. I think it's just one of those rhythm sections of racetrack that if you don't get quite right, you're going to have a trouble with some time. Back up to that front battle, you're not missing anything here. The Ferraris of Chris Beats and Curtis Jones is split up as we head through Arenberg now.
Yeah, at this point, it seems like these guys have just settled into a pretty consistent rhythm right now. It seems like Beats definitely is a bit quicker than Jones. We do know, however, as Andrew, I believe you mentioned earlier, we got the information from Corey Rexford, our social media guy for tonight. Just the fact that Beats is on fresher tires right now than Jones, who didn't elect to take the tires last time. Definitely helping Beats right now. And the question does become, is he going to be able to stretch it to the end of the race? It's going to be tough to say, and that's a lot of the fun that we're going to get to have over the next 11-plus minutes.
And after that misstep by Webb, you can see how he has fallen back. The time that he gained, he lost that and more. He's fallen back now to 8.3 seconds off the front runners, while Wade Hayes runs in 4th, and Mikkel Ruderbusch is your top 5. Now, Beats is going to retain this lead. It starts to open up this gap, but now the question is going to start to become, when does he get to the start-finish line, and how much time is going to remain on the clock, and how hard is he going to push it before he gets back the next time through? It's going to come down to timing, but I think it's safe to point out that there was a relatively noticeable momentum shift in this championship back at Imola. That was when Jesse Webb and Chris Beats, who still at that point in the season were kind of splitting wins back and forth. Things kicked off at Donington Park with Jesse Webb on top of the top step of the podium with victory there. We went on to Road America. Chris Beats found victory lane for the first time. Then Webb ended up grabbing the win at Detroit. Webb went back-to-back by virtue of winning at Spa. So even though Webb had the lead there as far as the total number of wins in the win column, 3-2, It was at Imola where these two drivers, on a track that is not known for producing the most thrilling of sports car battles, literally had an all-out brawl in the final 2 laps when a rare misstep by Jesse Webb allowed Beats a clear path through, and he ended up grabbing victory. He then came out and ran very strong at Laguna Seca, and as we mentioned on the beginning of our broadcast, the points deficit between these two, once drops are considered, is only 3 markers. That's how tight it is for the remainder of the season, and on a track that is offering up as many variables as the Nurburgring, with pit strategy coming to a point, with driver's craft or racecraft coming to such a point, with the masterful job that Jesse Webb did being able to conserve fuel in order to make his number work, I think tonight may be one of the leading chapters that we lean back on and discuss at the end of this season as perhaps the reason why the championship goes down the way that it has, as Beats is looking for the opportunity to win 3 in a row and extend the championship point lead, with Webb running in 3rd and Curtis Jones trying to play the role of the spoiler with 9 minutes to go.
We do have a lap car up ahead. I believe that's the machine, let's see, 177 machine of Mick Blue, it should be, based on the car colors up there. So Chris Beats have to be weary of that, but you mentioned the fact that lately Chris Beats is hot, and it's really about who's hot and who's not. These guys race throughout the week. It's not like real series. Think about Formula 1, NASCAR, where these guys, they only have these races that we talk about, for example. These guys race throughout the week. They're constantly racing. They're constantly going through whatever they're going through in real life, be it work or whatever. It's all about who's hot and who's not at that point in time. Right now, Chris Beats is hot, and Jesse Webb isn't so hot. And that's what it comes down to in these championships sometimes. And it's not necessarily always the same. That's why these battles, I think, end up so much better sometimes than their real-life counterparts. Because in the real-life Formula 1 series, for example, hell, even in real-life, Blanc Pond, I don't think it's Blanc Pond anymore, but IMSA, for example, that is what they do. They might run this or that here and there, something else every once in a while, but that is what they're focused on 9 times out of 10. Here, they're running multiple leagues throughout the week, multiple official races, they're practicing. Who knows exactly what they're doing on any daily basis? It's all about just trying to be good on iRacing at that point in time, and in a specific car as well. And again, I think it just comes down to Chris Beats right now. It seems like he's in more of a zone. That said, he's coming up on lapped car. Mick Blue is, Mick almost moved over on him right there. Thankfully he didn't, but that could have been everything. Game over for Chris Beats.
Yeah, definitely an awkward part coming out of the smaller carousel, just in terms of the balance of the car coming there. So good job by both drivers. It looked a little sketchy, but we're going to continue onward. And I have to wonder if this will be the lap where we potentially get the white flag from iRacing Race Control. Lap around here takes 8 minutes. When we get to the line, it's going to be, say, low range 6 minutes, 15 seconds maybe. Chris Beats still in control, and you have to wonder now if maybe he is the guy that made the right strategy call. We were doubting him for a while, but we've been talking him up the last lap or two, and we've come to the point in time where we get to find out, as both the broadcasters and the fan tonight, it's going to be a heck of a lot of fun over the last 15 miles if we get the white flag this time by.
And Curtis Jones is doing everything he can. The lap traffic may have helped a little bit to stay within striking distance, but the tail of the tape, if these drivers do in fact have enough fuel and they did not short fill too much towards the end of this race, is going to be how close he could be up that straightaway that leads to the final few corners as Beats comes to the line here, and we await the indication to see if we will be working the final lap of this race. Right now, we are under 6 minutes to go, right at 6 minutes to go, so we could assume this could end up being the final lap. And we will keep our eyes on the timing and scoring ticker to ensure that that may in fact be the case, with Beats ahead of Jones by 1.5 seconds, Webb 11 seconds back, potentially clear to snag his, I'll call it a perfect streak of podium finishes for Beats, as it would be for Webb. The only difference is this would be the first time, if the order stays exactly the same, that Beats and Webb did not occupy the top 2 spots on the podium. So second verse may not be nearly exactly the same as the first, but it's going to be darn well close if things stay as they are. But fuel is the big concern, and with these laps taking in excess of 7.5 minutes, there are no guarantees, especially with a track that continues to be as challenging and yet daunting as this venue here at the Nurburgring. Webb appears to understand now after having a couple of close calls and a few offs as we ride on board with him here. He's still 10 seconds off the battle for at least the second spot. Make that more than 11 seconds back is that of Webb. And Andrew, I think being that he's had a couple of close calls, he's somewhat decided he's going to have to ride here and hope for a miracle, at least at this point.
Yeah, it's not realistic that he drives up there and gets it. What I will mention is this is lap 6 right here for Chris Beats. So this is where it's made or broken. And we haven't seen anything. We're seeing the same thing everybody else at home is seeing. We see green up there. We don't see white. Well, 1 lap to go. We're not sure yet. We won't be sure until around, I'd say, hole oct, high 8, exactly if this race is ending this lap or not. If this race ends this lap, Chris Beats, I think, easily has his victory as long as he doesn't misstep and cause himself to lose this race. I mean, it's up to him at this point if this is the white flag. The drivers know, we do not just yet. We'll find out very, very soon. That said, we do have a battle on the racetrack that isn't for the race lead. Let's talk about it momentarily because Alexander Veldman is catching Chris Brunnemer. This would be for position number 8. This is the first time we've had any other battle on the racetrack, excuse me, other than for the race lead in probably 40 minutes.
Yeah, Andrew, definitely awesome to see that these guys are getting some time here on Pit Stop TV because they both have had absolutely brilliant drives so far today. Brunnemer starting from, I believe, about the 22nd position, and then Veldman is a driver, the lone driver in the Ford GT, and he has been storming through the midfield. Gets loose, saves the car, doesn't actually lose too much time to Brunnemer, almost falls victim to commentator's curse. It looks like he's going to be fine for the time being, coming onto the Nordschleife there. But no, yeah, excellent job from these guys, and we were talking about it earlier, but it is very rewarding to see a Ford GT out there pushing as hard as he is. I do believe he was as high as about 7th or 8th earlier, but regardless, even if he comes home in 9th, it's been an absolutely incredible drive in that Ford GT for Alexander Veldman.
I'm sure if I was the one talking about that battle, he surely would have been it, because I've been the jinx of all jinxes this year, it seems. But so far, Veldman's able to continue to retain his position in 9th. And again, these two, the biggest movers in the field by far, with Brunnemer and Veldman starting back outside the top 20. And again, Veldman carrying the banner for that blue oval. You see Brunnemer started 22nd, Veldman started 24th, and they currently run 8th and 9th respectively in one of the best on-track battles that we have going as we enter now the final 2 minutes and 20 seconds of this race. Still no indication of a white flag. So Beats has got to be sweating this one out here, depending on where he is on the race course. And Jones has started to fall way back. So I'm wondering if Jones is starting to get in the mindset that this race could go one more lap, and he's going to have to start conserving a little bit of fuel. Webb as well has started to fall way back into the clutches. Beats appears to be the only one who's not necessarily slowing down at this point in the race. We're on board with Jimmy Allen trying to get a spot from Peters to get into the top 10 as Jimmy Allen, who's had a great night so far, with battles still continuing throughout this pack. And I'm sure we're starting to get some very sweaty palms on Chris Beats' hands as he's gripping the steering wheel for what may or may not be the final time around.
We're going to find out soon. Here's Chris Beats, our race leader. And I mentioned it would come around the Caracciola carousel. We're coming up to it here momentarily. And we'll have about a minute to go in our scheduled timer. It's hard to say exactly what we're going to have. Logically, we would think this would be the last lap, but sometimes with average lap times and such, iRacing can be just a little bit weird. So we may get one extra. I would be banking on the fact that this is the last lap. That said, Curtis Jones has really fallen off, but his pit stop time says he should be about on schedule. He should have enough fuel to go to the end of this race, despite running extra to take less fuel. The pit lane time says he should be okay. I wonder if that damage he's got, the little bit of damage he does have, is starting to catch him off guard, maybe. Some old tires possibly as well. It's hard to say what's going on for the 9 car. We are now just over 30 seconds away from finding out for sure if this race is over this lap or not.
And regardless for Jones, it's been an absolute breakout day. This season, he's been, outside of, say, Nick Ledecky or Chris Brunnemer at times, he now enters the fray as an elite club of drivers who's able to break up the 1-2 streak that Chris Beets and Jesse Webb have held for so much of this season. So just an absolutely brilliant drive to this point. And we still have a little bit left to play with, but if you're just going to look at what he's done over the course of 120 minutes, definitely an A+ job so far for a driver who is near the back end of the top 10 in points coming in.
This is the final lap.
So that is the best news of all for Chris Beets. He is working the final lap of this race, and he is starting to extend the margin back to Curtis Jones, who may have gone into fuel conservation mode, and that's going to offer up the opportunity for Beets to pedal it if he has to, with the gap now up to 6.4 seconds, back to the runner-up in Jones for the time being. But right now, Beets has an open door and an open opportunity to go for his 3rd consecutive victory, and this one for sure is going to be a bit of a statement win. He's still got to keep it on the pavement, though. The job is not done yet. It's not necessarily mission accomplished for that of Beets. And still, there are chances for this track to jump out and grab you at each and every corner. But he's got to start to feel the weight slowly coming off his shoulders as he comes down this long straightaway for the final time. The story this year has been that of Chris Beets and Jesse Webb. The story throughout the race looked as though it was going to be told in similar fashion, although Curtis Jones also perfected a bit of pit strategy to wedge his way between the two who have dominated this season. When all said and done, if Beets is able to navigate his way throughout these last couple of corners, it is going to be a familiar name in victory lane, but that seismic shift in the championship appears that it is going to remain strong, at least with 3 races left to go once Chris Beets rounds these final couple of corners, and he is continuing to expand upon his lead. No signs of slowing down through the narrow portion of the final corner that leads him up onto the main straightaway. And from pole, with masterful pit strategy, it's going to be 3 wins in a row for the point leader. Chris Beets tames the Nurburgring and captures victory in spectacular fashion in one of the most grueling challenges of the season.
And that is the big momentum shift for the championship. You mentioned it coming even a couple of weeks ago at Imola, where Chris Beets got that surprise win in the last few moments over Jesse Webb. It has just been mounting with the win last week at Laguna Seca as well. Suddenly, Chris Beets, easily, I think, the favorite for this championship in the Pacific Challenge GT3 Series. Here we see Wade Hayes across the start-finish line. Mikkel Ruderbusch surprisingly very, very close here, within a second and a half of getting to that car. The big battle on the racetrack is right here, though. Chris Brunnemer and Alexander Veldman. Not done yet. Newcomer versus seasoned veteran, at least in this series. Anything can still happen with these two. The number 2 and the number 169. Here comes Veldman. Goes left. He's going to get on by. What can Brunnemer say about that in the final couple of corners? We're going to pass Tiergarten. We're going to pass Antonius Boucher. What can Brunnemer do? This is the battle for 8th place on the racetrack. We've been seeing this mount over the last couple of moments here, Trey Shuttlesworth, and it's all going to come to a close momentarily.
We'll head into Hohenride, the final complex here, and it will probably be that Ford GT of Alexander Veldman coming out on top. Brilliant utilization of the slipstream, and that's going to earn him an 8th place position in the Ford GT3. We keep mentioning it so much just because it's a car that so many drivers don't elect to go with, and he's able to come away with a brilliant top 10 finish against one of the series' best competitors in Chris Brunnemer. Nothing not to put Chris Brunnemer down by any means, because he had to drive from the back of the field today. So to get a 9th place at a track like the Nordschleife from the 22nd position is also a brilliant points pickup. And we're going to see more competitors come across the line. That's Corey Peters rounding out the top 10. And behind him, it's going to be the likes of Jimmy Allen. And then BC Voigt and John McClintock, last cars on the lead lap. They are quite a ways back from the rest of the field, who all managed to stay within about 2 minutes of race winner Chris Beets.
So while we have a couple of cars that are still left to come to the checkered flag to round out our field, Beats, Jones, Webb, your podium. Wade Hayes with his best run of the season on board with BC Voigt for his final go-around before he cements himself a relatively solid finish. I think finishing on the lead lap here tonight is, of course, objective number one. Voigt currently scored in 12th with McClintock, not that far behind him. They will be the last couple of cars to come to the checkered flag on the lead lap before these drivers will elect to shift their focus to their next and final endurance race on the calendar, the Sebring International Raceway, in 1 week's time. Voigt continuing to navigate his way through these final couple of sectors here before he could say that he too survived this race and was able to do so here while remaining on the lead lap. And Voigt's a name that we did not call on all that much here tonight, and that's a good thing. That means he kept it relatively clean, did not get himself swept up in many incidents, and for a driver who's been relatively consistent throughout the weekend, or I should say throughout the night, trying to get himself back up in the top 10 in points. He was 12th coming into tonight's race. He's going to be one of the last cars to cross and come home for the checkered flag, as he still has a handful of corners left to navigate.
Yeah, we'll stick with BC Voigt here until he crosses the line. The next car behind him will be John McClintock, and that's 39 seconds back. But these guys are still racing too. We've got to cover these guys just the same. So you know what? We'll wait it out here with BC Voigt as he works the back end of this racetrack. We want to make sure that all positions are as final as we can guarantee them. We won't wait the extra 40 seconds on John McClintock, because once BC Voigt crosses, John McClintock will be the only car left on the lead lap to finish that race, and there's nothing else he can gain. So we'll stick with BC Voigt here for just a few more moments, make sure he gets down the Dottinger nice and safely, and make sure he comes home in the 12th position, because anything can still happen for these very important spots back here. Every position in this field is equally important, aside from maybe first. I think first you could say is a bit more important, but these guys all have their own battles as well, and anything can still happen. Yes, BC Voigt on the Dottinger now looks pretty safe, but you never know.
Yep, it'll be down the back straightaway one more time. German translation is Dottinger Hove rather. It'll be across this Bilstein Breaks Bridge, and only about 30 more seconds, and that'll conclude the battle for the last position on the lead lap. Very strong and consistent drive from BC Voigt here today. He is a driver who normally contends in the mid-pack pretty well, flirts with the top 10, and I think walking away with the lead lap finish, if you're any driver here in the Pacific Challenge at the Nurburgring, is definitely something that you can be incredibly proud of. That'll wrap up the battles on the lead lap. BC Voigt coming across the line in 12th place will secure both 12th and 13th, as John McClintock will come across the line, wrapping up a 13-car lead lap group. About half of the drivers that signed up tonight and took the grid, about 27 drivers registered. Not sure exactly if 27 did elect to actually go out onto the racetrack, but we had 27 guys come to virtual Germany and try here, or guys and gals rather, not taking into account Sarah Rabb, who comes home in, I believe, the back end of the top 20 tonight.
So when the last car comes to the checkered flag, I guess it's safe to say that it is in fact official. It's going to be Chris Beats, who is the winner yet again this season. 4th victory of 2021 as McClintock is the final car to come to the checkers. And we will have an opportunity to hear from our front runners. Would you believe that we've got 2 hours in the books at one of the most historic, longest, and most challenging road courses in the world, the Nurburgring? When we come back to our live coverage of the Pacific Challenge GT3 Series on Pit Stop TV, we'll hear from our winner as well as our entire podium finishers. We'll be right back on the other side of these messages. Don't go anywhere.
Sound Art is a product that is a speaker and it's art. We combine it together and we call it Sound Art. What makes it so unique that any picture can be your speaker? Sound Art gives you the high quality sound without the ugly speaker. This isn't a picture with a speaker, the picture is the speaker. Just imagine your wedding picture uploaded onto a canvas and now it's speaking 10,000 tunes. I mean, it's a very cool concept. What we like so much about it that you can take anything that means something very special to you, upload it on the canvas, have it hanging up in your room, your balcony, wherever you want to put it, and now it's a speaker. I mean, how cool is that? It's something that we have that and no one has. No one has this product. It's just a great gift to give anybody. It's just a neat concept. Around here we say, art never sounded so good.
After months of quarantine, we're all interested in how we can become our best self. The team at Permanent Makeup and Cryo is here to help you get the flawless makeup look every day without the extra effort or time. When it comes to your appearance, you deserve the best care that money can buy.
Welcome back to the virtual Nurburgring as we just finished up a 2-hour affair on the VLN layout on this historic venue located in Nurburgring, Germany, which was host of round number 7 of the 2021 Pacific Challenge GT3 Series. You know, motorsports writer Jeff Gluck, who now writes for The Athletic, once defined a definition of a good race as the level of unpredictability at the finish. I never would have thought that at the end of this 2-hour event that we would not be so sure as to who the winner was going to be all the way up to the final lap between varying fuel strategies, pit strategies, and as luck would have it, when the checkered flag fell, it was a name in which we've called on many a times already in 2021. He also happened to be the points leader, and he picked up his 3rd win in a row and 4th of the season. It is a pleasure now to welcome our winner of one of our longest races of the season, this endurance event here at the difficult 15-plus mile Nurburgring. Chris Beets, first off, welcome to the broadcast booth. But secondly, I know we've talked to you many times, 4th time this season, 3rd in a row. But what does this win in particular mean to you, given the circumstances of this racetrack?
No, it means a lot. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, what a struggle. It was a long race. I think some drivers had to pull over to use the restroom. It's a long time to be sitting in one spot.
Yeah, and the duration of the race itself is one thing to consider, because it's not like we're just doing, you know, a short road course and you kind of get in a bit of a rhythm, and it almost goes by. As a matter of fact, Andrew Cardinale related it to, you know, many times where you may drive home from work in an afternoon. You've done it so many times, it's kind of in the back of your head, and it just seems to go by quickly. You can't do that here. This is a place that tests your ability as a racer on each and every corner, and it kind of has to keep you on your toes. Then you got to worry about fuel strategy. For you, what was your biggest challenge in this 2-hour event on a track this tough?
Yeah, fuel strategy. I was saving fuel practically 12 out of the 15 laps. So once the guys that I thought could win kind of crashed out, I kind of changed my pit strategy and I went for the short fill, and it ended up working out.
So we were trying to keep tabs on everybody's fuel strategy and when they were making plans to pit or when they were saving fuel. For you, though, we happened to notice that you pitted with what seemed to be 47 minutes to go, and then you found a way to kind of stretch it out a little bit longer there, almost to the end. And then all of a sudden, Curtis Jones pits with 20 minutes to go, and he comes out ahead of you. You find yourself in a 3-car battle with Jones, Booth. Were you aware that everybody was on a bit of a differing strategy, or at that point, was it full attack mode?
I knew everyone was in a different strategy. I figured if I pitted earlier and took tires, the counter strategy would be to take no tires to get ahead of me. On this track, I thought it was suicide, so I kind of just took the risk that I'd have to pass a couple cars for the win.
It turned out to be the race-winning move, but the other element of this track is when the time clock expires. If we don't get the white flag in time, you may be forced to do another 7.5+ minutes and hope that you have the fuel to do so. Was that something that you were calculating, your timing, as far as when you got to the line, when there was, under 7.5 minutes to go or so, or were you just hoping to get lucky from that standpoint?
We planned it out. I think the consensus was that it was going to be a 15-lap race unless somebody did ridiculous sub 50 lap times, which I don't think we could even touch in qualifying. So I think it wasn't a possibility. It was pretty concrete. 15 laps and work backwards on your strategy from there.
Well, there's certainly been a shift in momentum in this championship. As we mentioned, third win in a row, and they're all coming at tracks that vary so much in terms of difficulty with Imola, Laguna Seca, and now the Nurburgring. We got another endurance race, though, right around the corner at Sebring next week. What are your thoughts? 3 races to go, one more long one before we wrap it up with a couple of sprint events here, with you now taking a little bit more command in this championship fight.
Man, it's not over until the last race. I just got to keep going into each race, kind of like how I went into this one, that I have to win. In order to stretch that gap, all it takes is one spin and a bad result, and we're looking at the table turning.
Before we let you go and sit back and finally be able to breathe a little bit and perhaps, let those hands get a little bit of a rest after 2+ hours of hard work, plus all the training you did, I know that you got a lot of people behind you who make this possible. This is obviously a team win on a number of occasions. Who do you have to thank for being able to get the job done in what was the toughest challenge this year?
Always PSM. Again, we share strategies. We talk it out. We practice together. And for Mikkel, obviously, for the paints. I swapped cars today, and I needed a new paint, and he produced a pretty killer one. Appreciate it.
Well, Chris, spectacular job. Thank you for making that 2-hour event so entertaining for all who watched and all who covered it. And congratulations on the hot streak that you're on. Hopefully you keep to ride this wave of momentum into Sebring next week, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thanks, Chris. And again, that is Chris Beets, who is victorious yet again, this time, though, in one of the longest races of the season, one of the toughest tracks you'll find on the sim. At this time, I'll turn it over to Andrew Cardinale IV, who was with our runner-up, who got his first podium of the season in Curtis Jones.
First podium of the season, and it was almost looking like a possibility at his first win of the season. Curtis Jones, we were as surprised as ever to suddenly see you exit the pit lane ahead of Wade Hayes, and then you guys had that epic battle for just a lap or so. But I mean, a lap here is 8 minutes. It went on for a good minute. You end up side by side there for a moment, and then suddenly, well, it seems like your PSM teammate took advantage of you there at that moment, and you really couldn't hang. How'd your race go?
I couldn't have really asked for a better run. This is probably going to be the only chance this season, most likely, for me to get on the podium. So I came in on the second pit stop and I had 44% on the front tires, and it felt like the wrong thing to do, but I didn't take tires. I didn't take tires the whole race, and I didn't really have the pace of Chris, but it felt good to get up.
And I say you couldn't hang with Chris Beets, but you were leaving everybody else in the dust. You had speed. It didn't always look like the number 9 was going to come out into a podium position, but suddenly we realized, okay, this guy's for real. This guy is here to play with the big dogs. You say you're not too optimistic about the rest of the season, so in that case, what set the Nurburgring apart to you for an opportunity to get up onto the podium?
I did a ton of grinding last year before the 24-hour race at the Nurburgring, and it was a time where I was kind of between jobs, so I had a ton of time to throw into it, so I've got a lot of experience there. I've got several hundreds of laps at the Nurburgring just in like the past year. I did a bunch of VLN races. I just really enjoy it. it really makes you maintain focus for a very long time. And if you make a mistake, an off track can end your race, you know. So it's just a special one to me. It's different than everything else. It's not like, you know, these knockdown, drag out sprint races and such like that. You got to be a little bit more methodical.
Absolutely, and I mean, I love that you looked at the Nurburgring Nordschleife as an opportunity to have your best race of the season. Meanwhile, even teammate Chris Brunnemer was looking at it like he might use his drop week today. I'm sure he wishes he could maybe swap points with you, but an amazing run here, getting up into second place, and you started 5th, so an amazing starting spot as well. Who do you have to thank? Who do you have to shout out this evening with your first podium on the season?
Oh, man. You know, it's unfortunate, but a lot of my faster teammates, they had that one off track that just ended their race, and that, you know, it's unfortunate, but it happens here. This is a race of attrition. It always is, and you just got to keep your nose clean and you know, just make sure that you end up on the other side.
Absolutely, and Curtis, thank you so much for your time. And you say you're not too optimistic about the rest of the season, but hey, I'll say it right now. We'll see you at Sebring. We better be talking to you on the podium after that one as well.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
That's Curtis Jones nabbing a second place finish this evening. We'll hand it right down to Trey Shuttlesworth with, for the first, I mean, he's been on the podium all season, but for the first time, not in first or second place, it's Jesse Webb.
So, hi, Jesse. Thanks for joining us in the booth. Probably not the outcome you wanted to come away with the 3rd place here tonight at the Nurburgring, but what are your initial feelings getting out of the virtual cockpit after a 3rd place run?
At least I finished. I'll give myself that. It's better not to crash than, finishing 3rd. I mean, it's not what I was looking for sure, but it's not horrible. Like, at least I can take it, and if I need to throw away a race, hopefully it's 3rd place here, but we'll see.
No, that definitely accounts for something for anyone that was able to come out here tonight and execute over 2 hours at a track that's so punishing like this. So, yeah, one of the things we were talking about a lot tonight is the variance in pit strategy. Did you have anything in mind coming into tonight, or did you have to get a little bit variable in terms of what you wanted to do as the race went on?
I'm not gonna lie, I hardly did any practice for the Nürburgring. I only started practicing today, or tonight. Just more or less because there wasn't VRS races here, and Nürburgring isn't one of my favorite tracks that I want to be running laps alone. So, yeah, no, I didn't do much practice, so we didn't know too much about the strategy, but I had a spotter, and he kind of, I'm not going to blame him for anything, but he had all good intentions, but kind of screwed me. He thought it would go a lap longer than it did, so we had based our strategy around it, and then we were going super slow at the end because we thought Beats was screwed with his pit strategy, because if there's one more lap, he wouldn't have made it. So we thought we were coasting in the clear, that Curtis was, and then they weren't going to finish the race without a splash and dash. So we thought we were totally fine. I just needed to keep it on the track. And then about 2 laps remaining in the race, Hugh came up with the, oh shoot, we're not going to go for a lap as long as we thought. And yeah, that was when it was over.
Yeah, it seemed like you guys were maybe a minute or two shy of getting an additional lap, and that definitely could have played into your favor a lot better than what you were able to walk away with today. So yeah, just looking forward from the Nürburgring, what is your strategy going to be going forward into the final 3 rounds, just in terms of preparation going into those tracks and knowing that you have a bit of a gap that you'll have to make up?
I think I can see strong finishes, because, I think tracks like Sebring, Bathurst and Suzuka, I love those tracks. I think they're great tracks, but even Sebring, I don't know it yet, but I can already see the track kind of probably floating my boat. It's kind of that bumpy, but it's kind of something like, Detroit. You get that bumpy bit to the track and walls that are close, and I just feel like I can probably capitalize on the last 3 races and hopefully, just have a strong winning contention.
All right, thank you, Jesse. It's been a long one. I'm sure you want to decompress. Before you head out, is there anyone you'd like to thank for your 3rd place effort tonight?
Yeah, my mom and dad, everybody at PSM, and Mikkel for making, I forgot to mention him all the time, is Mikkel for making the liveries for tonight and for this series.
All right, thanks again, Jesse. Congratulations on third place, and hope to talk to you a little bit more for the last 3 rounds here in the Pacific Challenge this season.
Thank you.
So that's Jesse Webb. He rounds out the podium tonight in what was an absolutely electric 2-hour, if you will, endurance event here at the Nurburgring Nordschleiffe.
Yeah, and I'll tell you guys one thing that I'm starting to notice here. There's a common thread amongst what you hear from all of our top 3 finishers. It's the element of confidence. You know, Chris Beets, as well as Curtis Jones, both seem very confident coming into tonight's race. And as you can see, Jesse Webb open to admit this is not his favorite place to go. But, you know, if I was the competition, I would be listening to when Jesse Webb says he's excited for the races that are to come. He mentioned how much he loved Detroit. That was one of his sights for his victories there the last time out. So next 3 races are going to be fun to watch. Let's take a look at how they came to the checkered flag here tonight. We already heard from our top 3 finishers in Chris Beets, Curtis Jones, and Jesse Webb. Wade Hayes had his best run of the season as well with a 4th place finish, just missing out on the potential for a podium, but nevertheless, it was an incredibly strong effort. And second top 5 of the season for Mikkel Ruderbusch. You heard him get a lot of praise for creating some of the beautiful liveries that we saw tonight. Ruderbusch also deserves praise for his second 5th place finish of the season after finally seeming to get out from underneath that black cloud that's been following him around for the first half of 2021. Trevor Anderson continues his consistency, 7th in points, 6th in the race. David Flanagan with a very strong effort here tonight after he has competed in all the events. That's his first top 10 of the 2021 season thus far. A strong 7th place finish. We talked about the Blue Oval tonight. First time we see one on track. Alexander Feldman, 24th to 8th. Another hard charger on the night. Chris Brunnemer, 22nd to 9th. Those are 2 drivers who worked very hard to work their way up through the pack on a track which is not necessarily known for the best of passing opportunities. And Corey Peters takes you through your top 10 finishers here tonight at the Nürburgring.
We head on down to the 11th position. We find none other than Jimmy Allen, about 2 minutes and 4 seconds back from race winner Chris Beets. BC Voigt, John McClintock, they were the final 2 on the lead lap. Look at that difference, 3 minutes from Jimmy Allen to BC Voigt. Then you see some of the guys who had a lot of trouble this evening. George Tacek, Mick Blue, Alexander King, they check in at 1 lap and 2 laps down and 2 laps down respectively. Alan Roth, fan favorite, the miracle Alan Roth, I should say, in the 126, finishes 4 laps down in 17th. Then Randall Ayers in 18th at 5 laps down. Then Patrick Herring and Sven Hartman round out your top 20, 6 laps down to 10 laps down apiece.
And we look at even more of the victims of the Nürburgring. The first person to finish outside of the top 20 tonight, Sarah Rabb, will finish 10 laps down, followed by James Hansen and Gavin Cohn, both respectively finishing 12 laps down. And we go into the likes of, say, Brady Lubenow. He was running up in the top 5, top 3 early in the running, had issues within the first couple of laps, and he was just never able to recover after making contact with that Armco barrier early in the running. Same for Tyler Langenberg. He will also finish 13 laps down, the 25th position. John Wittendorf finishes 26, 15 laps down, and I do not believe that Antonio Constantino takes the green flag. Regardless, he will finish 27th here in his series season debut.
A lot of differing storylines that we followed throughout the night, but the same is, I should say that, you know, the final result is very similar to what we've had many times this year with Chris Beets on top. Before we go, we do want to extend one more final thank you to a number of the partners that make this possible on the Pit Stop TV platform, starting out with our friends at Tucson Sound Art. The reminder is it's your picture and your music. Provide any image that you want, perhaps with some of these beautiful liveries that were designed for our top running finishers here tonight, and they will create a beautiful framed high-quality canvas with a built-in Bluetooth speaker. And with Sound Art, you truly get the best of both worlds. The website is TucsonSoundArt.com, and make sure that you use the promo code PitStopTV at checkout to receive 10% off your purchase. We also want to thank one of our newest partners here on the platform, Race Pace, because they're the ones that you want to lean on if you want to try to up your game. If you ever wish that you had a race engineer on speed dial, this is your opportunity. Our friend Tyler, who is a real-world race engineer, is there, available, ready, willing, and able to help you step up your game before your next race. I'm telling you, I would have been calling him off the hook in preparation for tonight's event here at the Nürburgring. It's your opportunity to pick up the pace with Race Pace. We also want to thank Permanent Makeup and Cryo in Maine, longtime supporter of Pit Stop TV, because when it comes to your appearance, you deserve the best care that money can buy. The owner there, Ashley Bullier, a certified micropigmentation specialist who provides professional, safe, and personalized services. Learn more about some of the products and services that are available at their website, permanentmakeupinmaine.com. And lastly, we want to thank our partner at Whiplash Media, the parent company to Pit Stop TV, and provider of a number of the camera packs that you see in operation tonight, as well as many other iRacing related or sim racing related elements, including paint schemes, stream overlays, and more. They also have a presence in real racing as well. Check out all they have to offer at whiplash-media.com. Well, gentlemen, I figure we'll do one more roundtable before we turn our attention to the remaining 3 races on the calendar. One more endurance race next week, Sebring. Then we head over to Bathurst, followed by the Suzuka International Racing Course. If we can get this much drama out of 2 hours at the 15-mile Nurburgring, I bet the final 3 races of this championship are going to be just as memorable, if not more. I can't wait to see what happens. Andrew, I mean, what are you looking forward to? Next week? All of them? I can't pick one, so I'll put the pressure on you for that.
Well, you know what? I'm pretty partial to Suzuka, but it's hard to pick one. And as a driver especially, I think it's hard to pick one. You got 3 very different racetracks. One that compares oh so closely to Detroit. One that is, I think the wild card is Phillip Island. It's a bit of an underused circuit. Those who like it love it. We'll have to wait and see. I'm not too familiar with it myself. I think it's the wild card of the bunch to the end of this series. What I am, again, excited about is Suzuka. It's a great racetrack, I think, to cap off this season. Very flowing, very technical. It's really going to push these guys to the limits. Suzuka doesn't necessarily seem like one of those racetracks that fits in like Spa and Bathurst, but it is a long racing course. It was developed to test vehicles to their extent. I'm very excited to see how this field manages at a place like Suzuka. We're going to find out for none other than the championship crowning round. And if this battle stays intact, oh boy, I can see it now. Chris Beats, Jesse Webb fighting into 130R. That should be exciting.
Yeah, I can only back up the feelings of Andrew. The awesome thing going into the final 3 rounds is knowing that just the fact that the championship could be decided with one move over the course of those 3 rounds, just because of how tight it is between the top 2 drivers. And then not just that, but we have so many battles to settle within the championship, whether it be respective positions in the championship running order. We have the amateur championship as well, and that's its own battle, where Sven Hartman is currently leading the fray. And as Andrew said, and you said, Eric, we have an absolutely excellent trio of tracks to go to. Yeah, Phillip Island isn't as well known, but I think it'll definitely play very well to GT3 cars. And then Sebring is an absolute staple for American sports car racing, and Suzuka is going to present a very tall task for these drivers to conclude the season as well.
Yeah, Sebring's going to serve as the final endurance race of the calendar, so I got to buy more calculators so I could burn through them a little bit there, so I could figure out the fuel mileage and preparations for that one. Still a lot to look forward to. Before that Sebring event, though, we got a couple races on the platform between then and now. Tomorrow night, Pit Stop TV is going to be live with Operation E Motorsport at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve if you want to get more of your road racing fix. The stock cars of the Bluegrass iRacing Series kick off their 12th race of the season on Wednesday night at Darlington. Friday night, it's the LTAC Cup Series with their 5th race of 2021 at Michigan. And then Saturday and Sunday, the Nortona 500 duels at Daytona Saturday evening. Sunday night, it's going to be the Nortona 500 at Daytona. We had the Nord Classic on the platform last weekend. That was a blast. We expect the 500 duels and 500 to be the same. And then, of course, 1 week from tonight, another doubleheader. We'll have dirt cars for you with the BRPI Racing Series. It's actually going to be at USA International, and then the Pacific Challenge GT3 Series. As we mentioned, their final endurance race of the season, round number 8 at Sebring next Monday night. Again, for more information or to spread the news or spread the word about Pit Stop TV, check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. We had an all-star production crew. I want to echo the sentiments that Andrew mentioned earlier tonight. Emerson Arden, we're thinking about you and your family. We hope that you're back online, up and running, and that you remain safe with all the terrible weather they're getting down there in Texas. And our thoughts are with everybody who's dealing with unusual circumstances on the weather front all throughout the country and world. Andrew Cardinale IV is pulling double duty tonight on the production side and on the commentary team. Trey Shuttlesworth was the other voice that you heard as well, and Corey Rexford, who held it down on the social media platforms all night long. It is thanks to them that I have the pleasure of being able to do these races late here on the East Coast, but it is worth it each and every time to work with all of you. With that, we're done for tonight. We'll be back, as we mentioned, next week with the Pacific Challenge GT3 Series as this championship battle continues to tighten up and intensify, and we'll see how it all pans out. Until then, I want to wish you all farewell, and we'll see you next time on Pit Stop TV. Good night, everybody.